Standing in the marble lobby of the Grand View Resort, I watched my father's face twist with disgust as he blocked my path. "You're not welcome at our luxury resorts," he sneered loud enough for the elegant guests to hear. My stepmother Grace smirked beside him, while my younger sister Madison filmed everything on her phone. 10 years since they'd thrown me out, and nothing had changed. I picked up my phone, smiled calmly, and said, "Security remove the Fairchild family's VIP privileges." Their keycard stopped working instantly. The memory of that satisfying moment would have to wait. Let me take you back to where this all began 10 years ago when I was 18, and my world shattered completely. My mother, Eleanor, had passed away after a long battle with cancer. She'd been the heart of our family's hotel business, the one who'd transformed my grandfather's single roadside inn into a collection of boutique properties. She'd built Fairchild resorts with love, treating every employee like family and every guest like they were visiting her home. In those final months, she'd held my hand and whispered promises. "Everything I've built is for you, Anastasia. The lawyers have it all arranged. When you turn 18, the trust fund will be yours. You'll have everything you need to follow your dreams, maybe even expand the hotels like we talked about." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She'd never lied to me. The funeral was elegant and understated, just like her. My father, Daniel, stood at the podium delivering a speech about legacy and family values that would have made my mother proud. He held my hand during the service, tears streaming down his face. For those few hours, I thought maybe we could heal together. 6 months. That's all the time he waited before bringing Grace home. "Anastasia, meet Grace Winters," he announced over dinner at our estate. "We've been seeing each other, and I think it's time you two met." Grace was everything my mother wasn't. Where Mom had been warm and genuine, Grace was calculating and cold, though she hid it well behind perfectly veneered teeth and designer clothes. She air-kissed my cheek and cooed about how she'd heard so much about me. "Your father tells me you're interested in the hotel business," she said, sliding into what had been my mother's chair at the dining table. "How wonderful! I have some experience in hospitality myself." By experience, she meant she'd been a cocktail waitress who'd caught my father's eye at a hotel bar in Vegas. I learned that later from the staff who whispered when they thought I wasn't listening. Within 3 months, they were married. Within 6, Grace was pregnant with Madison. And suddenly, I went from being Daniel Fairchild's beloved daughter to an inconvenience that reminded him of his first wife. But I held on. My 18th birthday was approaching, and with it, my inheritance. Mom had been specific about the amount, $12 million plus shares in the hotel company. Enough to start my own life, maybe even my own boutique hotel like we dreamed about during those long hospital conversations. The morning of my birthday, I came downstairs to find Daniel in his study with our family lawyer, Richard Pemberton. They stopped talking when I entered. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Daniel said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Richard's here to discuss your trust fund." I sat down eagerly, ready to hear about my future. Richard couldn't meet my eyes as he shuffled papers. "Anastasia," he began slowly, "your mother's will designated your father as trustee of your inheritance until he deems you ready." The words hit me like ice water. Ready, but Mom said when I turned 18. "Your mother was very ill toward the end," Daniel interrupted smoothly. "She wasn't thinking clearly. The lawyers advised me that giving such a large sum to a teenager would be irresponsible. But it's my money, Mom left it to me." "And you'll get it," Daniel assured me, "when you've proven you can handle it. Maybe after college, once you've shown some responsibility." Grace appeared in the doorway, baby Madison on her hip. "Oh, the birthday girl is up, Daniel. Shouldn't you tell her about the job opportunity?" My father's expression hardened slightly. "Grace thinks, and I agree, that you should learn the value of hard work. We have an opening in housekeeping at the Grand View Resort. You could start there, work your way up." Housekeeping. I stared at them in disbelief. I'm supposed to inherit part of these hotels, not clean them. "Everyone starts somewhere," Grace said sweetly, "unless you think you're too good for honest work." The trap was perfectly set. If I refused, I'd be called spoiled and entitled further justification for withholding my inheritance. If I accepted, I'd be under their control cleaning rooms in the hotels my mother built. I want to see the will, I demanded. I want to talk to another lawyer. Daniel's face darkened. Are you calling me a liar? Suggesting I'd steal from my own daughter? I'm suggesting you show me the documents Mom signed. The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. My cheek burned as I stared at my father in shock. He'd never hit me before. You ungrateful little brat, he hissed. After everything I've done for you, your mother spoiled you rotten, filled your head with fantasies. You want the money, earn it. Take the job or get out. Daniel? Grace gasped theatrically. Maybe we should give her time to think. No, he said coldly. I've made my decision. You work for us or you leave with nothing. I stood up, my cheek still stinging. I'll leave then. But this isn't over. That money is mine and you know it. The next hour was a blur of rage and cruelty. Daniel had the staff pack my things while Grace supervised, making sure I only took clothes and personal items. My laptop, phone, credit cards, even my car keys were confiscated. Company property, Daniel explained coldly. You're not an employee, so you're not entitled to them. They threw my suitcases on the front lawn. I stood there in the drizzling rain, watching my father lock the door of my childhood home. Grace waved from the window, Madison crying in her arms. I made it to the bus station with the $40 in my wallet. As I sat on the cold plastic bench, soaked and shivering, I pulled out an envelope that had fallen from one of my books during the chaotic packing. My hands shook as I recognized my mother's handwriting. It must have been tucked inside the book I'd been reading to her during her final days. I opened it carefully, trying not to let the rain smudge the ink. My dearest Anastasia, it read. If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I need you to know that I've recently discovered some disturbing things about your father's financial dealings. He's been moving money from the hotels, setting up accounts I don't have access to. I've tried to protect your inheritance, but I fear he may find a way around it. I've contacted my old friend Arthur Hartwell about this situation. If you ever need help, find him at Hartwell Properties. He promised me he'd look after you. Be strong, my darling. Your father wasn't always like this, but money has a way of revealing who people really are. Don't let him break your spirit. You have your grandmother's strength and my heart. That's worth more than any inheritance. All my love, Mom. I clutched the letter to my chest, rain mixing with my tears. She'd known. She'd tried to warn me, protect me, but she'd run out of time. The cancer had taken her before she could fix what Daniel had broken. That night, I slept in a 24-hour diner, nursing a single cup of coffee until the morning shift manager took pity on me and offered me a job washing dishes. It wasn't the Grand View Resort, but it was a start. As I tied on my apron and faced the mountain of dirty plates, I made myself a promise. Daniel thought he'd won, thought he'd broken me, but he'd forgotten that I was Eleanor Fairchild's daughter, and my mother had built an empire from nothing. I could do it too, and when I did, I'd take back everything he'd stolen and more. He just didn't know it yet. Life at the bottom was a harsh teacher, but I was a determined student. The diner job barely covered rent for a cramped studio apartment above a Chinese restaurant. The smell of General Tso's chicken became my daily perfume, and I learned to sleep through the clatter of late-night deliveries. For 3 months, I washed dishes until my hands cracked and bled. I saved every penny living on leftover food the cook would slip me at the end of shifts. But I wasn't just surviving, I was watching, learning. I studied how the diner operated, memorized customer patterns, noticed inefficiencies in the workflow. When the day manager quit, suddenly, I seized my chance. I can handle the breakfast rush. I told the owner, a tired man named Carl, who spent more time at the racetrack than his business. Give me 1 week. If I increase your morning revenue, you make me permanent. If not, I go back to dishes. He laughed, but he was desperate. Sure, kid, knock yourself out. I reorganized the entire morning system. Prep started earlier. Coffee was always fresh, and I trained the servers to upsell our homemade pastries. By week's end, breakfast revenue was up 30%. Carl made me manager and gave me a small raise. It was during one particularly hectic morning that Arthur Hartwell walked into my diner. I recognized him immediately. His picture had been in hospitality magazines for decades. Tall and distinguished with silver hair and kind eyes, he owned one of the most successful hotel chains in the Northeast. He sat at the counter and ordered black coffee and wheat toast. "We're actually known for our blueberry pancakes," I suggested, refilling his cup. "Made fresh this morning." He smiled. "Just the toast, thank you. I'm meeting someone." For an hour, he sat there checking his watch occasionally. Whoever he was meeting never showed. As he prepared to leave, I made a decision that would change everything. "Mr. Hartwell," I said, quietly placing his check on the counter. "My name is Anastasia Fairchild. My mother was Eleanor Fairchild. She mentioned you in a letter." His eyes widened slightly. He studied my face, and I saw recognition dawn. "Eleanor's daughter. My God, you have her eyes." He glanced around the modest diner. "What are you doing here?" The story poured out of me in hushed tones between customer orders. His expression grew darker with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Your mother was a remarkable woman," he finally said. "We met at a hospitality conference 25 years ago. She was the only person who ever beat me in a negotiation, and she did it with such grace I couldn't even be angry." He pulled out his business card. "Come see me tomorrow. Hartwell Properties headquarters, 10th floor. We'll talk properly." I arrived at his office the next day in my only professional outfit, a black suit I'd found at Goodwill. The building was everything the diner wasn't: gleaming marble, fresh flowers, employees who moved with purpose and pride. Arthur's office overlooked the city, its walls lined with awards and photographs of beautiful hotels. He gestured to a leather chair across from his massive desk. "I did some checking last night," he began without preamble. "Your father has been busy. The trust fund your mother established is ironclad, but as trustee, he can delay distribution almost indefinitely. He's also been leveraging Fairchild Resorts assets for personal loans." "Can you help me?" I asked directly. "I can do better than that," Arthur replied. "I'm 73 years old, Anastasia. I built this company from scratch, but I have no children to leave it to. I've been looking for someone with the right combination of hunger and integrity to mentor." He leaned back in his chair. "Your mother vouched for you before she died. She said you had the mind for this business and the heart to do it right. Prove her correct, and I'll teach you everything I know." The catch: I had to start at the very bottom, just like at the diner. But this time, it was in a 5-star hotel. My first day at the Hartwell Grand, I reported to housekeeping at 5 in the morning. The head housekeeper, a no-nonsense woman named Carmen, handed me a uniform and a list of 40 rooms. "Mr. Hartwell says you're special," she said skeptically. "We'll see about that. Your first room is the penthouse. Guest checked out an hour ago. Better hurry, new arrival at noon." I attacked those rooms like my life depended on it. Every surface gleamed, every towel was perfectly aligned, every amenity precisely placed. When Carmen inspected my work, she found nothing to criticize. "Tomorrow you'll do 50 rooms, was all she said, but I caught her small nod of approval. For 6 months I cleaned rooms. I learned every inch of the hotel from the inside out. I understood how long each task really took, which supplies were wasted, which procedures were inefficient. I also listened to guests' mental notes of complaints and compliments alike. Arthur would sometimes appear during my shifts, observing silently. One evening, as I was finishing the ambassador suite, he spoke. "What would you change about this room?" I'd been thinking about this for weeks. "The lighting is too harsh for evening arrivals. Guests are tired. They want warmth, not interrogation. I'd install dimmers and add ambient lighting options. The minibar is poorly stocked for our demographic. We need local options, not just standard brands. And this," I gestured to the desk, "no outlets within reach. Business travelers need accessible charging. It's 21st century hospitality, not 19th. He nodded slowly. "Write it up. Full proposal, cost analysis, implementation timeline. Have it on my desk Monday." I spent the entire weekend on that proposal researching suppliers, calculating costs, creating mock-ups. When I submitted it, Arthur read every page while I waited. "Good," he said finally. "Now do the same for the entire floor." That became my pattern. Days cleaning rooms, evenings studying hotel operations, weekends creating improvement proposals. Arthur started inviting me to management meetings, introducing me as his special assistant. I kept quiet, absorbed everything, watched how decisions were made. 1 year became 2, then 3. I moved from housekeeping to front desk, from front desk to reservations, from reservations to event planning. Each position taught me something new, revealed another facet of the business my mother had loved. Daniel never looked for me. I kept tabs on Fairchild Resorts through industry publications and discreet inquiries. The hotels were struggling. Grace's expensive tastes were draining profits, and Madison's failed attempts at social media marketing were becoming an industry joke. But my father's pride kept him from admitting any problems. It was during my 4th year at Hartwell Properties that Arthur called me into his office with an unusual expression. "Sit down, Anastasia. We need to have a serious conversation." My heart dropped. Had I done something wrong? Was he disappointed in my progress? "I'm dying," he said simply. "Pancreatic cancer. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe 8 if I'm lucky." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd lost my mother to cancer. I couldn't lose Arthur, too. He'd become more than a mentor. He was the father figure Daniel should have been. "We have work to do before I go," he continued briskly, not allowing me to wallow. "First, your inheritance. I've had my lawyers working on it for 2 years. Your father made one crucial mistake in how he structured the trust. We can't force him to release it, but we can sue for an accounting of how he's managing it." He pushed a folder across the desk. Inside were bank records, transaction histories, a clear trail of financial misconduct. "Your father has been using your trust fund as collateral for personal loans. He's been paying himself a management fee of $200,000 annually. It's all legal, technically, but it's unethical enough to bring before a judge. My lawyers are ready to file whenever you are." I stared at the evidence of my father's betrayal documented in black and white. "Do it," I said quietly. "File the lawsuit." "There's more," Arthur continued. "I've been keeping records of every transaction Daniel made while claiming to manage the family hotels. He's been embezzling Anastasia, skimming from vendor payments, inflating renovation costs, even stealing from employee benefit funds. I have enough evidence to destroy him when you're ready." "Why would you do all this for me?" I asked, overwhelmed by his thoroughness. Arthur smiled sadly. "Your mother saved my life once. Did she ever tell you 25 years ago I was drinking myself to death after my wife died? Eleanor found me passed out in a hotel bar after a conference. Instead of letting me become another industry gossip story, she got me help, stayed with me through the DTs, drove me to AA meetings, called me every day for a year to make sure I was staying sober." He pointed to a photo on his desk I'd seen 100 times him with a beautiful woman at a hotel opening. "That's my second wife, Margaret. I met her at an AA meeting Eleanor dragged me to. We had 15 wonderful years before she passed. I owe those years to your mother." His eyes met mine. "So you see helping you isn't charity. It's a debt I can finally repay." The lawsuit was filed quietly without media attention. Daniel was forced to provide a full accounting of the trust. The judge was not impressed by his management tactics. While we couldn't force immediate release of the funds, the court ordered all loans against the trust to be repaid immediately, and Daniel was removed as trustee. The money would be mine on my 25th birthday, just 2 years away. But I wasn't content to wait. Fairchild Resorts was bleeding money, and I saw opportunity in its weakness. "I want to buy them out," I told Arthur one evening as we reviewed quarterly reports. "When I get my inheritance, I want to acquire Fairchild Resorts." Arthur studied me carefully. "Revenge is expensive, Anastasia." "It's not revenge," I insisted. "Those hotels were my mother's legacy. Daniel is destroying them. Grace treats the staff like servants, not team members. Madison uses the properties as Instagram backdrops while occupancy rates plummet. They're killing everything Mom built. And you think you can save it? I know I can. You taught me how. Arthur was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled the kind of smile that meant a lesson was coming. Then we'd better make sure you're ready. Consider your real education officially beginning now. What followed were the most intense months of my life. Arthur opened his entire playbook to me: negotiation tactics, financial structuring, hostile takeover strategies. He introduced me to his network of lawyers, bankers, and power brokers. We studied every successful hotel acquisition of the last decade, dissecting what worked and what didn't. Meanwhile, I watched from afar as Fairchild Resorts continued to spiral. Daniel's response to declining revenue was to cut costs, which meant reducing staff and service quality. Grace's solution was to raise prices, driving away loyal customers. Madison created a reality show pitch about hotel heiress life that no network would touch. Arthur's health declined as my knowledge expanded. He taught from his hospital bed, oxygen tubes in his nose, but his mind still sharp. 2 weeks before he died, he called me close. "There's one last thing," he whispered. "I'm leaving you something in my will. Not money, you'll have your own soon enough. But Hartwell Properties needs leadership that understands its values. The board has already approved. When I'm gone, you'll be offered a position as Executive Vice President of Operations. You'll be the youngest in company history." "Arthur, I can't accept—" "You can and you will," he interrupted firmly. "Not because of sentiment, but because you've earned it. Every department head has submitted glowing reviews of your proposals. You've increased efficiency in every position you've held. The board would be fools not to promote you." He passed away peacefully on a Tuesday morning. I was holding his hand, telling him about my latest idea for the hotel restaurants. He smiled, squeezed my fingers once, and was gone. The funeral was attended by hundreds in the hospitality industry. I stood with Margaret's relatives, the closest thing to family he'd had. After the service, the board chairman approached me. "Ms. Fairchild, when you're ready, we'd like to discuss your future with Hartwell Properties." I was ready. I'd been preparing for this moment for years. What I didn't know was that my father was about to hand me the perfect opportunity to reclaim everything he'd stolen. The chess pieces were all in position. I just needed to make my opening move. My 25th birthday arrived with no fanfare, just a notification from the bank that $12 million had been deposited into my account. After 7 years of working for every penny, the number seemed surreal. But I didn't celebrate. This wasn't a windfall. It was ammunition. As Executive Vice President of Operations at Hartwell Properties, I had access to industry data that painted a clear picture. Fairchild Resorts was hemorrhaging money. Their occupancy rates had dropped 40% in 3 years. Staff turnover was at an all-time high. Guest satisfaction scores put them in the bottom quartile of luxury properties. My assistant Marcus knocked on my office door one morning with a particularly interesting report. "You asked me to monitor Fairchild Resorts' corporate filings. They've just announced a private stock offering. They're looking for investors." I set down my coffee carefully. "How many shares?" 30% of the company. They're desperate, Anastasia. Word is they need the capital to avoid defaulting on their renovation loans. The loans they'd taken using my mother's hotels as collateral. The renovations that existed mostly on paper while Grace funneled the money into her personal accounts. I'd been tracking it all, building my case. "Set up a meeting with our investment team," I told Marcus. "Use the Sheffield Holdings name." Sheffield Holdings was the company I'd created to manage my inheritance named after my maternal grandmother. And Marcus, keep this absolutely confidential. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. Fairchild Resorts needed money desperately, and they couldn't afford to be choosy about where it came from. Through Sheffield Holdings and a network of shell companies my lawyers had established, I began buying shares. Not all at once that would raise suspicions. Small purchases here and there, always just under the reporting thresholds. Within 2 months, I controlled 15% of Fairchild Resorts. Daniel hadn't noticed. He was too busy trying to keep creditors at bay. Grace was occupied with her latest vanity project, a spa renovation that existed mainly in her imagination. Madison was in Cabo charging the trip to the company while posting about scouting new locations. The quarterly board meeting was approaching. As a significant shareholder, Sheffield Holdings received an invitation. I accepted on behalf of my client, knowing Daniel would never suspect the mysterious investor would attend personally. The night before the meeting, I stood in my apartment choosing my outfit carefully. Not the scared 18-year-old he'd thrown out, but the executive I'd become. A charcoal suit that cost more than I used to make in 6 months at the diner. The watch Arthur had left me in his will. My mother's pearl necklace, the one thing of value I'd managed to keep. "You sure about this?" Marcus asked when I told him my plan. "Once you reveal yourself, there's no going back." "There never was any going back," I replied. He made sure of that when he threw me out with $40 to my name. The meeting was held at the Grandview Resorts Conference Center. I arrived early, watching from my rental car as board members filed in. There was Richard Pemberton, the lawyer who'd helped steal my inheritance, now gray and stooped. Grace's brother, who Daniel had appointed to the board despite having no hospitality experience. Various investors who'd been promised returns that would never materialize. And then Daniel himself pulling up in a Bentley he couldn't afford, stepping out with the confidence of a man who thought he'd gotten away with it all. I waited until the meeting had started before entering. The conference room door opened silently and I slipped in during the financial report. Several board members glanced up absently, then did double takes as recognition dawned. Daniel was mid-sentence explaining away another quarter of losses when he saw me. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, anger, and finally fear. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, standing so abruptly his chair toppled backward. I walked calmly to the table, Marcus behind me, with our documentation. "Good morning, Father, board members. I'm here representing Sheffield Holdings, your newest major shareholder." "Security!" Daniel barked. "Remove this woman immediately." The security guard stepped forward, then hesitated when I held up my shareholder documents. "I own 15% of this company. I have every right to be here." Richard Pemberton was thumbing through his papers frantically. "This is impossible. Sheffield Holdings. We verified. How did I what, Richard?" I asked pleasantly. "How did I recover from being thrown out of my home with nothing? How did I build a career while you were helping my father steal my inheritance? Or how did I manage to buy a significant stake in the company my mother built?" I smiled. Hard work and careful planning. Mother would be proud. Grace chose that moment to make her entrance fashionably late as always. She froze in the doorway, her designer heels clicking to a stop. "You?" she breathed, her perfectly made-up face contorting. "Hello, Grace. Still charging your shopping sprees to the company." "Oh, I know about those. The $40,000 weekend in Paris marked as a business development trip. The $100,000 jewelry purchase categorized as client gifts. It's all in the forensic accounting report I commissioned." I opened my briefcase and began distributing copies of a bound report to each board member. Daniel tried to grab them, but there were too many. "This is a comprehensive analysis of Fairchild Resorts' financial status," I announced. "You'll find documentation of systematic embezzlement, fraudulent loan applications, and misuse of corporate funds. Page 47 is particularly interesting. It details how renovation funds were diverted to personal accounts." Board members were flipping through pages, their expressions growing more alarmed with each revelation. Grace's brother pushed his copy away. "Daniel, what is this?" "Lies," Daniel snarled. "She's trying to destroy me out of spite. She's always been unstable ever since her mother died. We tried to help her give her a job, but she refused to work for her inheritance like any responsible—" "I have the receipts," I interrupted calmly. "Every transaction is documented, including the $200,000 annual management fee you paid yourself from my trust fund. By the way, Father, you'll be receiving a bill for that. The court was very clear about repayment." Madison burst through the door, phone in hand. "Daddy, I'm live streaming this for my followers. Family drama is trending right now, and—" She stopped seeing me. "Oh my God, Anastasia, you look different." "Hello, Madison. Still trying to make influencer happen. How's that working out?" "Last I checked, your Hotel Heiress Life Instagram was costing the company $50,000 a month in staged photo shoots while contributing zero revenue. At least I'm not some bitter psycho who can't let go of the past." Madison snapped, but her voice wavered. She'd never seen me like this, calm and in control. "The past." I laughed softly. "This isn't about the past. This is about the future of Fairchild Resorts, which according to my analysis doesn't have one under current management. You're 6 months from bankruptcy." "You're lying," Daniel said, but sweat was beading on his forehead. "Am I? When was the last time you looked at the real books, not the ones Grace doctors for these meetings? Do you know your occupancy rate at the Riverside property? 32%. The industry average is 70. Do you know why?" I pulled out a stack of employee complaints. "Because you've cut staff to the bone and the remaining employees are too demoralized to provide decent service." An older board member, one of my mother's original investors, spoke up. "Ms. Fairchild, what exactly are you proposing?" I straightened, meeting his eyes. "I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in Daniel Fairchild's leadership. I have a comprehensive turnaround plan that will restore Fairchild Resorts to profitability within 18 months, but it starts with new management." "This is ridiculous." Daniel slammed his fist on the table. "I built this company—" "No," I said quietly, and the room stilled at something in my voice. "Eleanor Fairchild built this company. You've been tearing it down since the day she died. Every decision you've made has been about enriching yourself at the expense of employees, guests, and shareholders. It ends today." "You don't have the votes," Grace said desperately. "Tell her Richard. She can't do this." Richard was still studying the report, his face pale. "Daniel, these numbers. Is this accurate? Have you really been taking money from the employee pension fund?" "Temporary loans," Daniel said quickly. "All above board. We needed liquidity for the renovations." "What renovations?" I asked. "The ones you've been announcing for 3 years but never starting. I have the contractor bids here. You collected $5 million in renovation funds from investors. Would you like to explain where that money actually went?" Grace grabbed Madison's arm. "Turn off the phone," she hissed. "But Mom, the engagement is insane. I'm getting so many views." "Turn it off." But it was too late. Madison's followers had already screen recorded the meeting. Within minutes, clips were spreading across social media Daniel's red-faced denials, Grace's panicked attempts at damage control, and me calmly presenting evidence of their destruction of my mother's legacy. "I make the motion for a vote of no confidence," the older board member said quietly. "All in favor." One by one, hands raised around the table. Even Grace's brother, seeing the writing on the wall, voted against them. Only Daniel and Grace voted to retain leadership. "Motion passes," Richard said weakly. "Mr. Fairchild, you are removed as CEO effective immediately." Daniel stood slowly, his face mottled with rage. "You think you've won. You think you can run these hotels. You're nobody, a glorified maid who got lucky. A maid who increased efficiency by 30% in every department she touched," I corrected. "A nobody who was mentored by Arthur Hartwell himself, someone who actually understands that hotels are about service, not ego." I gathered my papers. "Oh, and Father, you'll want to check your corporate credit cards. I had them all frozen an hour ago. Grace's too. Turns out I'm not just a shareholder, I'm now the largest individual investor, which gives me certain emergency powers." "You can't do this," Grace shrieked. "These are our hotels, our life." "No," I said, standing to leave. "They were my mother's hotels. You just borrowed them, and now I'm taking them back." As I walked out, I heard Daniel's roar of fury. Grace's hysterical tears, Madison's confused protests about her interrupted live stream. But I didn't look back. The opening move was complete. Now came the hard part, saving what they'd nearly destroyed. But I was Eleanor Fairchild's daughter, trained by Arthur Hartwell himself. I was ready. The emergency family board meeting was scheduled for 2 weeks after my bombshell revelation. Daniel had spent that time desperately trying to shore up support, calling in old favors and threatening anyone who'd listen. But the numbers didn't lie, and neither did the forensic accountants I'd hired. I arrived at the Grandview Resort wearing a navy dress my mother would have loved, professional, but with a touch of elegance. The same ballroom where my parents had celebrated their anniversary parties now hosted what might be the company's most critical meeting. Marcus walked beside me, wheeling boxes of additional documentation. "They've been here since dawn," he murmured. "Your father's legal team takes up one entire side of the room." "Let them posture," I replied. Truth doesn't need an entourage. The ballroom was packed. Shareholders, employees, media representatives, and curious industry observers filled every seat. At the head table, Daniel sat flanked by a phalanx of lawyers. Grace perched beside him in a white suit that screamed innocence, while Madison fidgeted with her phone, despite repeated warnings from their legal team. I took my seat at the opposite end alone, except for Marcus. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The army of expensive suits versus Eleanor Fairchild's daughter with a single assistant. Richard Pemberton called the meeting to order, his voice shaky. The years of enabling Daniel's crimes had aged him, and his hands trembled as he shuffled papers. "We're here to address the motion of no confidence and hear proposals for Fairchild Resort's future leadership," he began. "Mr. Daniel Fairchild will speak first." Daniel stood his PR team, having coached him into a softer image. Gone was the rage from our last encounter, replaced by what they probably called stern disappointment. Fellow shareholders, employees, friends. He began spreading his hands in a gesture of openness. "We're family here at Fairchild Resorts. We've weathered storms before, and we'll weather this one. Yes, mistakes were made. The hospitality industry has been challenging for everyone. But to hand over control to an inexperienced child, motivated by revenge, that would be the real tragedy." He launched into a speech about legacy and loyalty, painting me as a vindictive daughter who'd abandoned her family in their time of need. Grace dabbed at her eyes on cue. Madison posted about family betrayal until a lawyer snatched her phone. When Daniel finished, several planted supporters applauded, but I noticed the employees remained silent, their faces carefully neutral. "Ms. Fairchild," Richard said reluctantly, "your response—" I stood slowly, taking my time. Let them see I wasn't rattled by Daniel's performance. Instead of going to the podium, I walked among the audience, making eye contact with people I recognized. "Maria," I said, stopping by the head of housekeeping who'd helped me a decade ago. "How many hours did you work last week?" She glanced nervously at Daniel before answering. 72, Miss Anastasia. "Overtime pay." We don't get overtime anymore. Mr. Fairchild says we're all managers now, so we're exempt." I moved on. "Thomas from maintenance. Is it true the Riverside property has black mold that's been painted over instead of properly remediated?" The man nodded reluctantly. "Third floor, east wing. Guests been complaining of breathing problems for months." Sarah from accounting. I found her in the middle section. "When was the last time the employee pension fund was fully funded?" 2018, she whispered. "The year Mrs. Eleanor passed." I returned to the front, letting the silence build. "My father talks about family. Let's discuss what that means at Fairchild Resorts under his leadership. 70-hour weeks without overtime. Health hazards covered up to avoid renovation costs. Retirement funds drained to pay for Grace's shopping sprees." "How dare you?" Grace shot to her feet. "I've contributed more to these hotels than you ever—" "Really?" I pulled out my tablet. "Let's review your contributions, Grace. January, $80,000 at Bergdorf's charged as uniform consultations. February, that weekend in Aspen, written off as a management retreat, where the only attendee was your personal trainer. March through December. Shall I continue? Madison tried to sneak her phone out again. This is insane content, she muttered. My followers would die. Your followers, I said, turning to her, cost this company $2.3 million last year. Every staged photo shoot in our hotels disrupted guest experiences. That viral video where you trash the penthouse suite for comedy, we lost our entire corporate booking from Techwell Industries, 30 rooms, 4 nights, because they didn't want to be associated with your brand of influence. At least I'm trying to bring us into the modern age, Madison protested. You're just jealous because I have a platform and you're, some corporate bore. I smiled. I'm someone who understands that hotels succeed through service, not selfies. But let's test your business acumen, Madison. What's our RevPAR at the Mountain View property? She blinked. Our what? Revenue per available room. Basic industry metric. No. How about our ADR, average daily rate STR index? I shook my head as she floundered. You've been influencing for our hotels for 5 years and don't know fundamental hospitality terms. But you collected a 6-figure salary as social media director. Daniel's face was purpling. Enough of this circus, you want to air dirty laundry. Fine. Let's talk about how you got here, Anastasia. Manipulating a dying old man, taking advantage of Arthur Hartwell's grief. The room gasped. I felt the blow but didn't flinch. Arthur Hartwell, I said clearly, was more of a parent to me in 5 years than you've been in 28. He taught me this business from the ground up. I cleaned rooms, worked front desk, handled angry guests at 3 a.m. I earned every promotion through documented performance improvements. Can you say the same, Father? Or did Grandfather simply hand you the keys? Don't you dare. I dare because someone has to. Someone has to stand up for the 800 employees you've betrayed. Someone has to speak for the investors you've defrauded. Someone has to remember that Eleanor Fairchild built these hotels with her heart, not her ego. I returned to my table and picked up a thick folder. This is my proposal for Fairchild Resort's future. But before we discuss tomorrow, let's finish with today. Specifically why Sheffield Holdings now controls 51% of this company. Daniel went white. That's impossible. You owned 15%. 2 weeks ago, yes. But your panic selling triggered several clause provisions in shareholder agreements. Every investor you begged to hold their shares, they came to me instead. Turns out they prefer potential profit to confirmed loss. I opened the folder. As majority shareholder, I'm calling for immediate leadership change. But I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I began my presentation. Revenue projections based on actual market data, not Grace's fantasies. Staffing plans that treated employees as assets, not expenses. Renovation budgets that would actually result in renovations. Partnership opportunities with Hartwell properties that would benefit both chains. The Grandview Resort alone is hemorrhaging $40,000 weekly, I explained. But with proper management, restored staff morale, and genuine investment in guest experience, we can be profitable within 6 months. The entire chain can be industry-leading within 2 years, but it requires leadership that puts the hotels first, not personal gain. An investor raised his hand. Ms. Fairchild, your projections assume significant initial investment. Where's that capital coming from? From me, I said simply. I'm prepared to invest $8 million of my personal funds into immediate improvements, new linen updated technology staff training programs, and yes, actual renovations, not just press releases about them. You'd risk your inheritance on this, another shareholder asked. My mother's inheritance, I corrected. She'd want it used to save what she built. Besides, it's not a risk when you know what you're doing. Arthur Hartwell taught me that confidence comes from competence, not bravado. Grace laughed shrilly. $8 million. That's nothing. Tell them about the debt, Daniel. Tell them what it really costs to run these properties. Daniel tried to silence her, but Grace was spiraling. $200 million in loans, hidden subsidiaries bleeding money. The Riverside property isn't even ours anymore. It's collateral for— "Shut up!" Daniel roared, his mask finally slipping completely. The room erupted. Shareholders demanded explanations. Employees looked stricken. Madison had somehow gotten her phone back and was live streaming again, narrating the chaos like reality TV. I remained calm in the storm's eye, waiting. When the shouting finally died down, I spoke. $200 million in debt explains the desperation. It doesn't excuse it. Every dollar stolen from employees, every corner cut on safety, every lie told to investors, it all leads here, to this moment, where you have a choice. I stood addressing the room with my mother's dignity and Arthur's authority. Continue with leadership that brought you to bankruptcy's edge, or choose change. Choose someone who's lived this business from the ground up, who's cleaned the rooms, handled the complaints, balanced the books, and still believes in what hotels can be, places where hospitality isn't just a word, but a promise. You self-righteous little— Daniel started toward me, but his lawyers held him back. "Call the vote," I said quietly. "Let's end this." The vote wasn't close. Even Daniel's planted supporters couldn't ignore the evidence. When Richard announced the results, 78% in favor of new leadership, Grace collapsed into theatrical sobs while Madison narrated everything for her followers. "You've destroyed us," Daniel spat. "Your own family." "No," I said, gathering my documents. "You destroyed yourselves. I'm just here to clean up the mess, like always." As security escorted them out, their corporate access revoked immediately, Maria approached me tentatively. "Miss Anastasia, does this mean— will things really change?" I took her weathered hands in mine. "I promise you, Maria, the Fairchild Resorts my mother built is coming back, and it starts with taking care of the people who take care of our guests." The meeting dissolved into chaos and celebration questions and concerns. But through it all, I felt my mother's presence. The little girl who'd been thrown out with $40 had returned as the woman who would save Eleanor Fairchild's legacy. The war wasn't over. Daniel wouldn't go quietly, and the debt Grace had revealed was worse than my projections. But I'd won the crucial battle. Fairchild Resorts was mine to save or lose. I intended to save it. Every last property, every loyal employee, every standard of excellence my mother had established. Daniel thought he'd broken me when he threw me out. He'd only forged me into someone stronger. The takeover was official, but possession and control were two different things. I learned that lesson quickly when I arrived at the Grandview Resort's executive offices on my first day as CEO. The elevator to the top floor required an executive key card. Mine had mysteriously been deactivated. The security guard at the desk shrugged apologetically. "System glitch, Miss Fairchild. IT says they're working on it." I took the stairs all 22 flights, arriving at the executive floor to find my mother's former office, now mine, by right locked and barricaded. Through the glass doors, I could see Daniel inside, shredding documents with methodical fury. "Building maintenance seems to have misplaced the master keys," his secretary informed me with false sweetness. "Mr. Fairchild says he'll be done, eventually." I called Marcus. "Bring the emergency locksmith and our forensic IT team. If he's destroying evidence, I want recovery specialists here within the hour." While we waited, I set up a temporary command center in a conference room. Word of my stair climb had already spread through the building. Employees kept finding excuses to walk by, some offering quiet support, others watching to see if Daniel's defiance would succeed. The locksmith arrived, but so did Daniel's lawyers claiming trespassing violations. I countered with my own legal team. The standoff might have continued all day, but then Maria from housekeeping appeared with her master key ring. "Oops," she said innocently. "Must have grabbed the wrong keys this morning. This one seems to work on executive doors. How clumsy of me." The moment we entered, the scale of Daniel's sabotage became clear. Not just shredded papers, but wiped computers, missing contracts, deleted customer databases. Years of operational data gone. "He's trying to make it impossible for you to run the company," Marcus observed grimly. "Then he doesn't know me very well," I replied. Start with off-site backups. Every major system has redundancy. And Maria, thank you. That took courage. She squared her shoulders. Your mother gave me a chance when nobody else would. I'm returning the favor. As Ait worked on recovery, I called an emergency meeting with all general managers. Only half showed up. The others, I learned, were in a secret meeting with Daniel at his country club planning what they called Operation Restoration, their attempt to sabotage operations until the board reinstated him. I addressed the managers who'd come. Gentlemen, ladies, you have a choice. Work with me to restore Fairchild Resorts to profitability and prominence, or follow Daniel Fairchild into unemployment. Because make no mistake, anyone who participates in sabotage will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Roger Bennett, GM of the Mountain View property, spoke first. With respect, Ms. Fairchild, your father has relationships going back 20 years. Vendors, suppliers, maintenance contractors, they're all loyal to him. Without their cooperation, you think vendors are loyal to a man who pays invoices 6 months late? I pulled out my phone. Let me show you something. These are messages from our top 5 suppliers sent to me this morning. They're thrilled someone who actually understands cash flow is in charge. Prompt payment trumps golf course promises every time. But Daniel's sabotage went deeper than vendor relationships. Over the next week, a pattern emerged: mysterious maintenance failures, reservation system, glitches that lost booking staff calling in sick en masse at properties managed by his loyalists. The Riverside property was hit hardest. Their GM, Paul Morrison, was Daniel's drinking buddy and most devoted conspirator. On Friday night, their entire restaurant staff failed to show for a wedding reception of 300 guests. I got the call at 10 p.m. Within 20 minutes, I was in my car with a hastily assembled team from other properties. We cooked, served, and saved that wedding. I spent half the night in the kitchen plating entrees in my designer suit, and the other half apologizing personally to guests. The bride's father pulled me aside near midnight. I've been coming to Fairchild Properties for 30 years. This is the first time I've seen a CEO in the kitchen. Your mother would be proud. She also would have had the foresight to prevent this mess, I admitted. Maybe, but she definitely would have handled it just like you did. Eleanor never let ego get in the way of service. By morning, the story had spread. Not just among employees, but to guests, vendors, and social media. Madison, in a spectacular miscalculation, posted videos mocking me for playing waitress, not realizing she was actually highlighting the difference between our leadership styles. Grace's sabotage was subtler but equally damaging. She'd cultivated relationships with wealthy guests over the years, positioning herself as the gracious hostess of Fairchild Resorts. Now she was calling them personally, warning them about dangerous changes and declining standards under new management. I discovered her campaign when Mrs. Wellington, a longtime guest whose family had been coming to our properties for generations, called me directly. Your stepmother says you're planning to turn the Grandview into some sort of hostel for backpackers, she said archly, that you have no respect for tradition or our privacy needs. Mrs. Wellington, have you ever known me to lie to you, even when I was 7 and accidentally broke your Ming vase in the lobby? She chuckled despite herself. You insisted on paying for it from your allowance. Took you 3 years of birthday money. I'm still that same person. What I'm planning isn't destruction of tradition, but restoration of standards. Would you give me a chance to show you, come for your usual stay next month? If you're not satisfied, I'll refund everything and personally find you accommodation at our competitor. Well, Grace was quite insistent. Grace has also been charging personal purchases to your corporate account for 5 years. I have the receipts. Shall I send them to your accounting department, or would you prefer to handle it quietly? There was a long pause. I'll see you next month, dear, and perhaps it's time we reviewed all our corporate charges. One by one, I countered their moves. When Paul Morrison tried to claim equipment failures at Riverside, I brought in independent inspectors who found evidence of intentional damage. When Daniel's loyalists spread rumors about mass layoffs, I held town halls at every property laying out clear plans that actually increased staffing in key areas. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Madison's live streaming addiction. She'd been documenting everything for her followers, thinking she was creating content about corporate drama. What she actually captured was Daniel instructing managers to delete reservation data, Grace bribing a health inspector to find violations, and most damningly, both of them discussing how to frame me for embezzlement. "The money's already missing," Daniel said clearly on camera. "We just need to make it look like she took it." Madison had posted it all before their lawyers could stop her. Within hours, it had been screen-recorded, shared, and reached not just social media, but law enforcement. Detective Patricia Morse from the Financial Crimes Unit arrived at my office the next morning. "Ms. Fairchild, we've been monitoring Fairchild Resort's financial irregularities for some time. This video evidence, combined with what you've already provided, gives us enough for criminal conspiracy charges." "I don't want to destroy them," I said carefully. "Just stop them from destroying everything my mother built." "Sometimes those are the same thing," Detective Morse replied. "Your father has been stealing from this company for years. Your stepmother has been his eager accomplice. Your sister, well, she's more witness than perpetrator. But this sabotage campaign, that's fresh criminal activity. They're not just fighting corporate battles anymore. They're breaking federal laws." I made one last attempt at resolution, calling Daniel directly. He answered on the 10th ring. "Enjoying playing CEO," he sneered. "It won't last. I've built relationships you can't imagine. By next month, you'll be under federal investigation," I interrupted. "This isn't corporate warfare anymore, Father. You're committing crimes, real crimes with real consequences. Stop now. Accept the buyout I'm offering for your remaining shares and retire quietly, or continue this path and lose everything. You think you've won because you have a title, because some employees feel sorry for you. I'll burn it all down before I let you have it. Then you'll burn alone. I'm done trying to save you from yourself." That night, the Riverside property suffered a suspicious fire in its kitchen. No one was hurt, but the damage was extensive. Security footage showed Paul Morrison leaving the building 20 minutes before the fire started, carrying containers that looked suspiciously like accelerants. The next morning, I stood in the burned kitchen with my leadership team insurance investigators and what seemed like half the local media. The safe path would be to point fingers, name names, declare war. Instead, I picked up a charred pan and spoke from my heart. This kitchen fed thousands of families. It launched careers, celebrated milestones, created memories. Someone thought destroying it would destroy us. They're wrong. Fairchild Resorts has survived worse than fire. We'll rebuild this kitchen better than before, and we'll do it with the same spirit my mother showed, turning setbacks into comebacks. I looked directly at the cameras. To those hoping we'll fail, watch us rise instead. To those who've stood by us, thank you. Your faith will be rewarded. And to our guests wondering if they can trust us, come see for yourself. Our doors are open, our standards are high, and our commitment is absolute. Marcus showed me the social media response that evening. The sabotage that was meant to portray weakness had instead revealed strength. Employees from across our properties were volunteering to help rebuild. Competitors were offering kitchen space. Guests were booking future stays as a show of support. "Your father underestimated something," Marcus observed. "What's that?" "People can tell the difference between those who tear down and those who build up. You're a builder like your mother. That's why you'll win." Daniel's conspiracy had failed in ways he couldn't have imagined. Instead of destroying morale, he'd unified the workforce against him. Instead of driving away guests, he'd created a groundswell of support. Most importantly, he'd provided enough evidence of criminal conduct to ensure he'd never threaten the company again. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Every act of sabotage had become evidence. Every attempt to destroy had strengthened my position. But the real victory was smaller and larger than corporate control. It was Maria having the courage to provide her key. It was employees choosing to rebuild rather than retreat. It was proving that Eleanor Fairchild's values weren't just memory, but living principles that could survive any attack. Daniel thought he was fighting for hotels. He didn't understand we were fighting for something bigger, the soul of what my mother had built, and that was something no amount of sabotage could destroy. The weeks following the sabotage attempts were a revelation in themselves. As I visited each property to assess damage and plan recovery, employees who'd been silent for years began to speak. It started at the Mountain View property during what was supposed to be a routine inspection. I was reviewing maintenance logs when Elaine from Human Resources knocked on the temporary office door. "Ms. Fairchild, there's something you need to know about the pension funds." I set down the reports. Elaine had worked for Fairchild Resorts for 15 years, hired originally by my mother. Her hands shook as she placed a thick folder on my desk. "I've been keeping records," she said quietly. "Mr. Fairchild, your father told me to stop sending pension contributions 3 years ago, said it was temporary for cash flow, but they never resumed." 3 years. I opened the folder, scanning documents that showed systematic diversion of employee retirement funds. That's millions of dollars. $4.7 million to be exact. He made me falsify the reports to make it look like contributions were being made. I should have refused, but he threatened my job and I have 2 kids in college. "You're not losing your job, Elaine. You're helping me save 800 others. Is there more?" There was. Over the next hour, she detailed a pattern of financial abuse that went beyond what I'd discovered. Employees forced to work unpaid overtime, tips skimmed from restaurant staff, bonuses promised but never paid with the funds redirected to Grace's personal accounts. "We thought about going to the labor board," Elaine admitted, "but your father had connections everywhere. He'd have destroyed us." "Not anymore," I assured her. "Document everything. We're going to make this right." At the Grandview housekeeping supervisor, Carmen Martinez, was waiting in my mother's, now my office when I arrived. She'd brought 2 younger employees with her. "Tell her," Carmen urged them. "She needs to know." The women exchanged nervous glances before one spoke. "Mr. Fairchild, he had a system. If we complained about anything safety issues, missing wages, broken equipment, he'd cut our hours until we couldn't pay rent. Then he'd offer us private loans from his personal fund. With 20% interest," the other added. "Half the housekeeping staff owes him money. He owns us." I felt sick. How long has this been going on? 5 years, maybe more. He targets single mothers mostly, people who can't afford to quit. Carmen pulled out a notebook. "I've been tracking it. 32 employees currently in debt to him. Total of about $200,000 in predatory loans. That evening, I met with Marcus in my hotel room, surrounded by evidence of systematic abuse. It's worse than embezzlement, I told him. He turned Fairchild Resorts into his personal fiefdom. Mom would be devastated. What do you want to do? First, we forgive every employee debt immediately. Company funds will cover it. Call it a employee relations overhead. Second, we backpay every hour of overtime, every skim tip, every stolen bonus, with interest. That'll be expensive, Marcus warned. Not as expensive as losing our soul, I countered. What good is saving the company if we don't save the people who make it work? The revelations continued at each property. At Riverside, I discovered Daniel had been covering up sexual harassment complaints against Paul Morrison. At Lakeside, maintenance staff showed me how they'd been forced to use substandard materials for repairs, while Daniel pocketed the difference. At Valley Gardens, the chef revealed Grace had been selling their food inventory to her friends' restaurants and pocketing the cash. But the most damaging revelation came from Tom Bradley, former head of security at Grandview. He'd retired early, but when he heard about the leadership change, he drove 3 hours to see me. I've been carrying this guilt for 7 years, he said, placing a flash drive on my desk. The night your mother died, there's something you need to know. My hand froze, reaching for the drive. What about that night? She called me to her room at 2 a.m., said she needed to update her will immediately, that she'd discovered something about your father. I helped her contact a lawyer, witness the new documents. She was going to file for divorce, Ms. Fairchild. She'd found evidence that your father was already moving assets, preparing to cut you out completely. The will, where is it? She gave me a copy to put in the hotel safe, but the next morning after she passed, your father had me retrieve it. Said it was too painful to look at. I should have known better. By the time I realized what he'd done, the lawyer had disappeared, and the original will was nowhere to be found. You kept a copy. My voice was barely a whisper. Digital scan on that drive. I knew someday you'd come back. Your mother, she wanted you to have everything. The hotels, the money, all of it. She knew what your father was becoming. I plugged in the drive with trembling fingers. There it was, my mother's real will dated just hours before her death. Clear instructions that I was to inherit everything immediately with specific provisions preventing Daniel from acting as trustee. She'd known. She'd tried to protect me. There's more, Tom said heavily. The security footage from that night. Your father visiting her room at 4 a.m. 2 hours before she died. He was carrying papers. When he left, he had her medical alert bracelet, the one she was supposed to press if she needed help. The implication hit me like a physical blow. You're saying... I'm not saying anything that can't be proved, but your mother was stable that night. The doctors said she had weeks, maybe months. Then suddenly... He shrugged helplessly. I've lived with this knowledge for 7 years. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe the cancer just took her faster than expected. But you deserve to know. That night, I couldn't sleep. The employees' revelations painted a picture of systematic cruelty, but Tom's information suggested something far darker. I called Detective Morse. I need to discuss some new information about my mother's death and my father's actions that night. We can meet tomorrow. Ms. Fairchild, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm suggesting you look at everything. The timeline, the will, changes the security footage. Let the evidence speak for itself. The next morning, I called an all-hands meeting across every property using video conferencing to reach all 800 employees simultaneously. I've spent the last week listening to your stories, I began. Stories of wages, stolen dignity, destroyed dreams, deferred. What was done to you under my father's leadership was wrong. Beyond wrong, it was criminal. I outlined the immediate changes, all predatory loans forgiven, all back wages, paid pension contributions restored with interest. But I went further. Effective, immediately, we're implementing an employee profit-sharing program. You're not just workers, you're partners in our success. We're also establishing an anonymous whistleblower hotline managed by an independent third party. Never again will you suffer in silence. The reaction was immediate. Some cried, others cheered. Many simply looked stunned as if they couldn't believe their nightmare was ending. Maria stood up in the Grandview conference room. Ms. Anastasia, we need to tell you something too. All these years we've been keeping records, not just of what was done to us, but of everything we saw. We have recordings, documents, photos. We knew someday someone would care enough to listen. One by one, employees came forward with evidence they'd hidden. Restaurant servers with recordings of Daniel and Grace discussing money laundering. Maintenance workers with photos of safety violations they'd been ordered to ignore. Accountants with copies of doctored books. Why didn't you report this before? I asked, overwhelmed by the scale of documentation. Carmen answered for all of them. Because we were waiting for you. Your mother told us before she died, take care of each other until Anastasia comes back. She'll make it right. We believed her. That afternoon, Detective Morse arrived with a team of federal investigators. I handed over everything: Tom's flash drive, the employees' evidence, the documented patterns of abuse. This is enough to put your father away for decades, she said quietly. But I need to ask, are you prepared for what comes next? Criminal trials, media coverage, family destruction. I thought of my mother dying while trying to protect me, of Maria and Carmen and Elaine and hundreds of others who'd suffered in silence, of Tom carrying his guilt for 7 years. My family was destroyed the night my mother died, I said firmly. Everything since has been collecting evidence. So yes, detective, I'm prepared. They stole more than money. They stole Hope Dignity Futures. It's time they paid for all of it. That evening, I walked through the Grandview lobby where this had all started. Employees nodded as I passed some, reaching out to touch my arm or whisper thank you. The fear that had permeated these halls for years was lifting, replaced by something I hadn't felt since childhood hope. Marcus found me on the terrace where my parents had once hosted glamorous parties. The wire transfers are complete. Every employee debt forgiven, all back wages paid. Total cost $8.3 million. Worth every penny, I said, watching the sun set over the gardens my mother had designed. She built this company on respect for people. We're just restoring her vision. And your father will face justice for everything he's done and possibly for things we're only beginning to understand. The revelations had transformed scattered victims into an army of witnesses, 800 employees with 800 reasons to see justice done. Daniel had thought fear would keep them silent forever. He'd underestimated the power of hope when someone finally offered it, and he'd certainly underestimated Eleanor Fairchild's daughter. The staff had kept faith for 7 years, waiting for me to return. Now it was my turn to keep faith with them. Justice was coming, and it would be thorough. Daniel's response to the employee revelations was swift and vicious. Within 48 hours of my all-hands meeting, I was served with multiple lawsuits. Defamation, breach of fiduciary duty, corporate espionage. His legal team threw everything possible at me, hoping something would stick. I was reviewing the lawsuit paperwork in my office when Marcus burst in. "We have a problem. Judge Harrison just issued an injunction freezing all Fairchild Resorts assets pending resolution of your father's claims." Judge Harrison. I pulled up his profile. Golf buddy of Daniel's for 15 years, of course. I speed-dialed our lead attorney, Jennifer Walsh. "We need an emergency appeal. Daniel's using his connections to strangle the company." Jennifer had worked with Arthur Hartwell for years and came highly recommended. Already on it. "But Anastasia, this injunction could cripple operations. We can't pay vendors, process payroll, or access working capital." Then we get creative. I called an emergency leadership meeting. "As of this moment, my personal funds are backing all operational expenses. I'll cover payroll, vendor payments, everything until we can overturn this injunction." "That's millions of dollars," my CFO protested. "Your inheritance was meant for this. Every dollar my mother left me was built from these hotels. I won't let employees suffer because Daniel has a judge in his pocket." Meanwhile, Daniel's media campaign was in full swing. He hired a PR firm specializing in crisis management, though in this case they were creating the crisis, not managing it. Stories began appearing in trade publications, questioning my mental stability, my qualifications, my motives. "Estranged daughter's hostile takeover, threatens historic hotel chain," read one headline. The article, clearly fed by Daniel's team, painted me as a vindictive child destroying a family legacy out of spite. Grace made the rounds on morning talk shows, dabbing at her eyes while describing how I'd torn apart a loving family. She wore my mother's jewelry during the interviews pieces she'd claimed were lost when I'd asked about them years ago. But their biggest weapon was Madison. They'd coached her to appear sympathetic, the innocent younger sister caught in a corporate crossfire. Her social media shifted from party videos to heartfelt posts about family betrayal and sibling rivalry gone too far. "Anastasia always resented me," Madison told her followers in a viral video. "I was born after her mom died and she blamed us for existing. Now she's trying to destroy our livelihood out of jealousy." The narrative was taking hold. Booking cancellations increased. Some corporate clients expressed concerns about leadership stability. 3 hotel managers Daniel had been cultivating submitted resignations, claiming they couldn't work under vindictive leadership. Jennifer called with worse news. "Your father's lawyers just filed criminal complaints. They're alleging you hacked company systems to steal financial data before the takeover. That's absurd. I accessed systems I had legal right to review as a shareholder. They're claiming the Sheffield Holdings purchases were fraudulent, that you used insider information obtained illegally. They've got a federal prosecutor interested. I laughed bitterly. The same prosecutor who vacations at Daniel's golf resort every summer. Different one, Patricia Nielsen. She's clean but ambitious. Taking down a corporate executive would make her career. Then we give her a bigger target. I pulled out the evidence binders we'd compiled, set up a meeting. If she wants corporate crime, I'll show her corporate crime, just not the kind Daniel's claiming. The meeting with Prosecutor Nielsen was scheduled for the following Monday. I spent the weekend preparing, but Sunday evening brought an unexpected visitor to my hotel room. Madison stood in the hallway looking smaller and younger without her usual designer armor. "Can we talk privately?" I ditched Dad's security guy. Every instinct screamed trap, but something in her expression made me step aside. She entered nervously, checking the windows as if expecting Daniel to materialize. "I know you're recording this," I said calmly. "Whatever setup Daniel planned, I'm not." She pulled out her phone, powered it off completely, even removed the battery. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to believe me. Dad's planning something big for tomorrow, something about the prosecutor meeting." I studied her carefully. "Why would you warn me?" "Because..." She sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. "Because I know what he did to you was wrong. I've always known. But I was 12 when you left, and he made sure I understood what happened to daughters who didn't play along. So why risk it now? The employee meeting, when you forgave all those debts, paid back wages." Dad went ballistic. He was screaming about ungrateful workers, how they deserved what they got. And Mom... Madison's voice dropped. "Mom said something about how, at least with Aunt Eleanor gone, there was no one left to coddle the staff. The way she said it." "What did she say exactly?" "That Eleanor was too soft, but at least she had the decency to die before she could ruin everything with her bleeding heart." Madison met my eyes. "Anastasia, they talk about her death like they're glad it happened when it did, before she could change her will." My blood chilled, but I kept my voice level. "Tom Bradley already told me about the will and the security footage." Madison shook her head. "There's more. I was snooping in Dad's office last week trying to find dirt for my reality show pitch. I found a safe behind the Monet reproduction. Inside were papers. Insurance documents. Dad took out a massive life insurance policy on Aunt Eleanor 2 months before she died. $20 million. What? I gripped the chair arm. But he wasn't the beneficiary of her estate. The insurance was separate. He forged her signature. I compared it to birthday cards she sent me. And there's something else. Grace's browser history from that time. She researched morphine overdose symptoms and how long before death is declared natural, the week before Aunt Eleanor died. I forced myself to breathe steadily. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm scared." Tears ran down her face, smearing her makeup. "The way they talk when they think I'm not listening, I think they're planning something for you too. Dad keeps saying you'll be handled before you can do any real damage. And Mom mentioned something about lightning striking twice and how tragic accidents run in families. You need to go to the police. With what, I'm their daughter. They'll say I'm lying. Say I'm making it up for attention like always." She stood abruptly. "I've told you what I know. Tomorrow's prosecutor meeting, don't go. Or at least don't go alone. Don't eat or drink anything they could have touched. And check your car before driving." She moved toward the door, then paused. "I'm sorry. For everything. For not being brave enough to stand up to them. For letting them use me against you. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry." After she left, I called Jennifer immediately, then Detective Morse, then hired a private security team for the prosecutor meeting. If Daniel was escalating to physical threats, I wouldn't make it easy for him. The meeting with Prosecutor Nielsen took place in a federal building with metal detectors and security cameras. I brought Jennifer 2 associates and 4 boxes of evidence. Daniel's legal team arrived with twice as many lawyers and their own mountain of documents. Ms. Nielsen. Daniel's lead attorney began smoothly. We're here to discuss Ms. Fairchild's pattern of corporate theft, beginning with her suspicious acquisition of shares through shell companies. Actually, I interrupted, we're here to discuss murder. The room went silent. Even my own lawyers looked shocked I hadn't told them about Madison's visit. Prosecutor Nielsen leaned forward. That's a serious allegation, Miss Fairchild. Then it's fortunate I have serious evidence. I placed Tom Bradley's flash drive on the table. Security footage from the night my mother died showing Daniel Fairchild entering her room and removing her medical alert device. Her actual will signed hours before her death, which he destroyed and replaced with forgeries. And this, I added Madison's insurance documents copied before returning to her. Proof that Daniel took out a $20 million life insurance policy on his dying wife without her knowledge. Daniel's face cycled through shock, rage, and fear before settling on bluster. This is desperate fabrication. Is it? I pulled out Grace's search history. Your wife researched overdose methods the week before my mother died. You visited her room at 4 a.m. and removed her ability to call for help. She was dead by 6. The insurance paid out within a month. You used that money to start buying judges building the network that let you steal with impunity for 7 years. Prosecutor Nielsen was examining the documents with growing interest. This evidence, where did it come from? Employees who've been documenting crimes for years waiting for someone to listen, a security chief who's carried guilt since that night, and I hesitated, then committed. A family member who's developed a conscience. Daniel slammed his fist on the table. Madison, that ungrateful little, Careful, Jennifer warned. Threatening a witness in front of a federal prosecutor is inadvisable. Mr. Fairchild, Prosecutor Nielsen said coldly, I think we need to redirect this investigation. Ms. Fairchild will need all your evidence and a list of witnesses. There are 800 witnesses to financial crimes, I said, and at least a dozen with direct knowledge of the conspiracy around my mother's death. They're all ready to testify. The meeting devolved into chaos. Daniel's lawyers demanded immunity deals. Prosecutor Nielsen called for additional investigators. Through it all, I sat quietly watching the man who'd stolen everything squirm as justice closed in. As we left the federal building, Jennifer whistled softly. You just dropped a nuclear bomb on your father. No, I corrected. I just stopped covering for his crimes. There's a difference. That evening, news broke that Daniel Fairchild was under federal investigation for financial crimes and potential murder. His carefully constructed narrative crumbled. The PR firm dropped him. His golf club memberships were suspended. Friends who'd supported him suddenly remembered urgent business elsewhere. Grace tried to flee to the Cayman Islands but was stopped at the airport. Madison, in a spectacular display of self-preservation, held a press conference announcing she was entering therapy to deal with family trauma and would be cooperating fully with investigators. You planned this, Marcus said as we watched the news coverage. You knew Madison would crack. You knew the prosecutor meeting would force Daniel's hand. I learned from the best, I admitted. Arthur always said the key to negotiation was making your opponent reveal their weakness. Daniel's weakness was believing his money made him untouchable. Grace's was her greed leaving digital footprints. Madison's was her desperate need for attention and approval. And yours? I thought about it. Probably my determination to save everything my mother built. But unlike them, I'm not ashamed of that weakness. It's what makes me strong. The legal counterattack had backfired spectacularly. Instead of destroying me, Daniel had exposed himself. Instead of silencing witnesses, he'd created an army of them. Instead of maintaining his grip on power, he'd provided prosecutors with everything they needed to destroy him. But the investigation would take time. Trials would drag on. And meanwhile, Fairchild Resort still needed saving. The real work was just beginning, but now I could do it without looking over my shoulder. Daniel had tried to bury me with lawsuits. Instead, he dug his own legal grave. And unlike him, I had no intention of gloating. I was too busy building the future my mother had envisioned. The federal investigation changed everything. With Daniel's assets frozen and criminal charges looming, the remaining Fairchild Resorts Board members scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. My phone rang constantly with nervous investors wanting reassurance that their money was safe. It was during this chaos that I received an unexpected call from Mitchell Stevens, chairman of Hartwell Properties Board. "Anastasia, we need to meet. There's something about Arthur's succession plan we haven't discussed." I met him at Hartwell's flagship property where I'd learned the business from the ground up. The boardroom felt different now, knowing I'd never again see Arthur at the head of the table. Mitchell didn't waste time on pleasantries. Arthur left specific instructions regarding Hartwell Properties' future. He believed the industry was ready for consolidation, but only under the right leadership, someone who understood both business and humanity. He slid a folder across the table. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing Arthur's final strategic plan. It wasn't just about succession, it was about revolution. He wanted you to merge Hartwell Properties with Fairchild Resorts, Mitchell explained. Create something new, something that could set standards for the entire industry. I stared at the numbers. Hartwell's 42 properties, Fairchild's 18. Combined, they'd represent 70% of luxury hotels in our region. The antitrust implications alone are manageable, according to our lawyers, especially given Fairchild's current distress. This wouldn't be a monopoly, it'd be a rescue. Arthur spent 3 years laying the groundwork, getting regulatory pre-approval structuring, everything to be bulletproof. Why didn't he tell me? Mitchell smiled sadly. He wanted you to save Fairchild first, prove you could resurrect what was broken before he handed you an empire. Classic Arthur, everything was a lesson. I spent the next week reviewing Arthur's plan. He'd thought of everything: financing structures that protected employees, brand integration, that preserved each chain's identity expansion possibilities, that could take us national. It was brilliant, comprehensive, and exactly what my mother would have dreamed of. But it required board approval from both companies. Hartwell's board, handpicked by Arthur, was supportive. Fairchild's board, in chaos from the scandal, would be harder to convince. I decided to make my announcement at the hospitality industry's annual conference. Every major player would be there, including the wavering Fairchild board members. If I was going to swing for the fences, I'd do it publicly. The conference hall was packed. Industry journalists, competitors, and hundreds of employees from both chains filled every seat. I took the stage wearing my mother's lucky pearls and Arthur's watch, carrying both legacies with me. 7 years ago, Fairchild Resorts threw out an 18-year-old girl with $40 and a suitcase. They thought they were discarding someone worthless. Instead, they freed me to learn from the best Arthur Hartwell, who taught me that hotels aren't about buildings, but about people. Today, I'm announcing the next chapter for both companies. The presentation screens lit up with the merger plans. Gasps rippled through the audience as the scope became clear. This wasn't just combining two companies, it was reimagining what hospitality could be. Effective immediately, I'm stepping down as CEO of Fairchild Resorts. I continued letting the shock settle, because I've accepted the board's offer to become CEO of Hartwell Properties, and my first act is to propose a full merger creating Hartwell Fairchild Hospitality Group. The room exploded with questions, but I raised my hand for silence. This isn't about corporate maneuvering, it's about values. Every employee will retain their job with improved benefits. Every property will be renovated to exceed industry standards. Every guest will experience what hospitality meant to Eleanor Fairchild and Arthur Hartwell: genuine care, impeccable service, and the belief that luxury isn't about price, but about how people are treated. Richard Pemberton stood up from the Fairchild board section. "This is highly irregular. The board hasn't approved." The board hasn't done much of anything except enable Daniel's crimes, I interrupted. But that changes today. I'm calling for an emergency vote. Board members can choose merge with Hartwell under my leadership or watch Fairchild Resorts sink into bankruptcy and criminal proceedings, because those are your only options. I left the stage to thunderous applause from employees and stunned silence from executives. In the lobby, reporters swarmed, but I pushed through to find Maria Carmen and other longtime employees. "Is it real?" Maria asked, tears in her eyes. "Are you really taking over both companies?" "If the board approves," I said then louder for the gathering crowd, "and if you'll trust me, this only works if we do it together. Every housekeeper, every desk clerk, every maintenance worker. You're not just employees, you're the heart of what we're building." The emergency board meeting convened that afternoon. Fairchild board members, realizing their alternatives were merger or destruction, voted unanimously to approve. Even Richard, facing his own legal problems for enabling Daniel's crimes, couldn't argue with the lifeline I was offering. Grace, watching from house arrest, released a bitter statement calling me a corporate raider who manipulated a dying old man. Madison, in a rare moment of wisdom, posted nothing. Daniel, in federal custody, was reportedly so angry he had to be sedated. But I wasn't thinking about them. I was in Arthur's old office, now mine, with Mitchell and the combined leadership team planning the integration. "We'll need to move fast," Jennifer advised. "With Daniel's criminal trial starting, media attention will be intense. We should use it to rebrand, show the world we're different now." "No rebranding," I decided. Hartwell Fairchild, both names, both legacies. We're not erasing history, we're honoring it while building something better. Marcus pulled up staffing projections. With 60 properties, we'll need massive hiring, training programs, leadership development. "Partner with hospitality schools," I suggested. "Full scholarships for employees' children, apprenticeship programs. Turn every property into a teaching hotel where people can build careers, not just find jobs." "That's expensive," the CFO warned. "That's investment." Arthur taught me the difference. Short-term thinking created Daniel's mess. We're playing a longer game. Over the next month, the merger progressed with stunning speed. Employees who'd been enemies under competing brands worked together, seamlessly united by shared vision. Properties that had poached each other's clients began referring business back and forth. The industry watched in amazement as two troubled chains transformed into something unprecedented. But not everyone was happy. Several competitors, alarmed by our sudden dominance, lobbied regulators to block the merger. They claimed we'd create unfair advantages, drive up prices, monopolize the luxury market. I responded by making all our employee contracts public, showing wages 20% above industry average. I published our pricing commitments, guaranteeing fair rates for 5 years. I opened our training programs to competitors' employees, turning what they called monopolistic into what I called leadership. The turning point came when Senator Patricia Chen, chair of the Commerce Committee, visited our properties unannounced. She spent 3 days interviewing employees, reviewing operations, studying our community impact. "I came expecting to find corporate greed," she told me over dinner at the Grand View. "Instead, I found something rare, capitalism with a conscience. Your merger isn't just approved, it's being studied as a model for responsible consolidation." That evening, I stood on the terrace where my mother had celebrated her last anniversary with Daniel. The gardens she'd designed were blooming again, properly maintained for the first time in years. The hotel hummed with positive energy, fully booked with guests who'd returned after hearing about the changes. Marcus joined me with champagne. Arthur would be proud. Eleanor, too. "You've done something incredible here." "We've done something incredible," I corrected. "None of this works without every single person who believed in better, who kept faith when they had every reason to give up, who chose building over destroying." "Speaking of destroying," Marcus said carefully, "Daniel's lawyers want to meet. They're offering a deal. He'll confess to financial crimes if you drop the investigation into your mother's death." I sipped the champagne, thinking. The prosecutor had warned me that proving murder after 7 years would be nearly impossible. The insurance fraud was clear, but actual homicide. Without a confession, we might never know the truth. No deal, I decided. He made his choices. Now he lives with the consequences, all of them. Even if it means he might walk on the murder charges, even then, because the real justice isn't just about punishment. It's about what we build from the ashes he created. 60 hotels, 8,000 employees, hundreds of thousands of guests who'll experience what hospitality should be. That's Eleanor Fairchild's legacy. That's Arthur Hartwell's dream. That's our justice. The night stretched before us full of possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, integration complexities, competitive pressures, the ongoing criminal trials. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. 7 years ago, I'd stood in the rain with nothing but determination and a mother's letter. Now I stood at the helm of an empire built on the values they'd tried to destroy. Daniel thought power came from taking. Grace thought it came from spending. Madison thought it came from attention. But real power came from building something worth protecting, from turning pain into purpose, from proving that business could be both profitable and principled. Arthur had seen it. My mother had dreamed it. And now with 60 properties and 8,000 partners, we were living it. The empire wasn't just revealed. It was reborn. The merger was 3 weeks old when Madison requested a private meeting. She'd been silent since the investigation began, maintaining a low profile that was uncharacteristic for someone who'd lived her life online. Her message was brief: need to talk about the future, alone. I chose neutral ground, a small cafe downtown, not affiliated with either hotel chain. She arrived looking polished but tired, designer clothes, impeccable, but her usual confidence dimmed. For the first time, I saw traces of our shared genetics in her face, Eleanor Fairchild's bone structure beneath Grace's trained artifice. "Thank you for meeting me." She began nervously stirring a coffee she didn't drink. "I know after everything you have no reason to trust me. You warned me about Daniel's plans. That bought you this conversation." She nodded quickly. "I want to make things right, really right. Not just legally, but personally. I've been in therapy, actual therapy, not the PR kind. I'm starting to understand how messed up everything was." "That's good, Madison. I'm glad you're getting help." "I want more than help." She leaned forward earnestly. "I want to contribute, to be part of what you're building. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm Eleanor's granddaughter too. This is my heritage as much as yours." I studied her carefully. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Let me work for the company. Real work, not the fake influencer job Dad created. I'll start at the bottom, prove myself like you did. I have ideas about social media, but legitimate ones. Ways to showcase our properties that actually drive bookings, not just likes." "Our properties," I noted her pronoun choice. "Sorry, your properties, but that's the point. I want to earn the right to say our. I know I was horrible to you, spoiled, cruel, complicit. But I was also a kid raised by wolves. That's not an excuse, just context. I want to be better." She pulled out a portfolio professionally bound. "I've been working on this for 3 weeks. A complete social media strategy focused on storytelling, not stunts. Highlighting employee achievements, guest experiences, the history Mom and Grace tried to erase. Look, I even reached out to some of Aunt Eleanor's old friends, collected stories about the early days." I flipped through the portfolio, impressed despite myself. It was thoughtful, well-researched, actually feasible. Madison had clearly put in effort. "I'd need to discuss this with the board," I said carefully. "Your association with Daniel and Grace is problematic." "I'll testify," she interrupted. "Publicly, everything I know about their crimes. I've already told prosecutors, but I'll say it in open court. Let everyone know who they really are." "That would destroy any relationship with your parents." "What relationship?" Her laugh was bitter. You think they ever loved me? I was a prop, Anastasia, a living doll to dress up and parade around. The moment I stopped being useful, they'd have discarded me too, just like you." The pain in her voice seemed genuine. I remembered the 12-year-old at my exile, confused and scared, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Maybe she had been as much a victim as a perpetrator. "I'll consider it," I said finally. "But Madison, if I give you this chance and you betray me—" "I won't," she said quickly. "I swear, I know I have to earn your trust. Just let me try." I agreed to a trial period. Madison would start in marketing as an intern, no special treatment reporting to someone who didn't know our history. If she succeeded on merit alone, we'd discuss next steps. For 2 weeks, it went well. Madison showed up early, stayed late, accepted criticism gracefully. Her supervisor, unaware of her identity, praised her work ethic. Employees who recognized her reported she was humble, even apologetic about her past behavior. I began to hope. Maybe redemption was possible. Maybe family could be salvaged from the wreckage. Arthur would have advocated for forgiveness. My mother certainly would have wanted me to give her a chance. The betrayal came on a Thursday evening. Marcus burst into my office, tablet in hand. "You need to see this. Madison's been recording everything." The video was already viral. "Inside the Fairchild Empire, a daughter's truth," blazed across the screen. Madison, in full influencer mode, spoke earnestly to the camera. "I've been undercover in my sister's organization for weeks now," she began. "What I've discovered will shock you. Behind the PR spin about employee care and ethical leadership, Anastasia Fairchild is running a cult of personality. Employees are terrified to speak out. Anyone who questions her is blacklisted. She's worse than our father ever was." The video continued with selectively edited footage. Me looking stern in meetings became tyrannical leadership. Standard performance reviews became intimidation tactics. Normal business discussions were framed as secret plotting. But the worst part was her reveal of confidential information. Details about employee salaries, private medical accommodations, we'd made sensitive financial data, all presented as evidence of corruption rather than care. "She claims to be different," Madison concluded tearfully, "but power corrupts. I tried to give her a chance, tried to be supportive. But I can't stand by while she destroys what our mother built. Someone had to speak the truth." Within an hour, the video had 1 million views. Competitors seized on it immediately. Business news channels ran segments questioning my leadership. 3 corporate clients called to express concerns. I convened an emergency meeting with senior staff. "How much damage are we looking at?" Jennifer was grim. She recorded privileged conversations. Some of what she revealed could violate employee privacy laws, but the damage to trust is worse. Staff feel exposed, betrayed. "The timing isn't coincidental," Marcus added. "This drops right before Daniel's preliminary hearing. It's meant to discredit you as a witness." I felt the full weight of my naivety. I'd wanted to believe in redemption in family and second chances. Instead, I'd handed our enemies ammunition. "Draft a response," I ordered. "Factual, not emotional, point-by-point refutation of her claims. And Jennifer explore legal options. She signed NDAs as an intern. She's violated every one of them." As the team dispersed, I remained alone in the conference room where my mother had once held board meetings. The portrait of her on the wall seemed to watch with sad understanding. She'd always seen the best in people, too. It's what made her a great leader and a vulnerable target. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Madison's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Brilliant, right?" Her voice had lost all trace of the vulnerability she'd performed in the cafe. Dad's lawyers helped with the editing. The crying was Grace's idea. She said it would play better than anger. "Why, Madison, I gave you a real chance." "A chance to be your employee, to grovel for scraps while you sit on the throne. I'm a Fairchild, too. I deserve equal share of everything." "You deserve what you earn. That was always the difference between us." "No, the difference is you got Arthur Hartwell and I got Daniel and Grace. You think you're better because some old man felt guilty about your mom. please. We're both products of our environment. Yours just had better PR. Is that what you tell yourself, that this is about fairness? You're destroying 8,000 people's livelihoods for a viral moment. She laughed sharp and bitter. Oh, please. You'll spin this like you spin everything. St. Anastasia saving the world one hotel at a time? But I know the truth. You're just as ruthless as Dad, just better at hiding it. The truth. I felt my control finally snap. The truth is, you're so damaged by their parenting, you can't recognize genuine care when you see it. You mistake kindness for weakness and authenticity for manipulation, because that's all you've ever known. I feel sorry for you, Madison, but my sympathy doesn't extend to letting you hurt innocent people. Innocent. Your employees are sheep and you're their shepherd leading them to slaughter. When this company fails, it won't fail, because it's built on something you'll never understand: mutual respect. Trust earned, not demanded. Values lived, not performed. I took a breath. Enjoy your moment of attention. It's the last you'll get from me. I hung up and immediately called an all-hands video conference. Within 30 minutes, I was addressing every employee across all 60 properties. By now you've seen Madison's video. I won't insult your intelligence by claiming it doesn't hurt. When I gave her a chance, I believed in the possibility of redemption. I was wrong, but my mistake doesn't diminish what we've built together. I looked directly into the camera, imagining Maria, Carmen, Tom, and thousands of others watching. She revealed private information meant to embarrass and divide us. Your salaries, which are higher than industry standard because you deserve them. Your personal accommodations, which we made because we value you as humans, not resources. Your honest feedback in meetings, which she frames as fear, but we know as trust. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to prove her wrong by continuing to be exactly who we are. A company that puts people first. A family built on respect, not blood. An organization where truth matters more than spin. The response was immediate. Employees began posting their own videos, not attacking Madison, but sharing real stories of how the company had changed their lives. Guests shared experiences of exceptional service. Even competitors privately reached out, admitting they knew Madison's video was a hit piece. But the revelation I'd been dreading came that evening. Detective Morse called with news from the prosecutor's office. Madison's video isn't just about discrediting you. She's been offered immunity to testify for the defense. She'll claim the evidence you provided was fabricated, that you've been planning this takeover since childhood, that your mother's death was natural, and you're using it for sympathy. Can she do that? She came to me with information, which she'll now claim was fed to her by you. She'll say you manipulated a vulnerable younger sister, used her trauma against her. It's brilliant, legally speaking. Completely destroys her credibility as a prosecution witness while painting you as the real villain. I sank into my chair. Madison's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was strategic, designed to protect Daniel and Grace while destroying me. The warning about their plans, the insurance documents, even her supposed therapy, all calculated to gather information and set up this moment. What do we do? I asked. We proceed without her. The employee testimony is still solid. The financial evidence is undeniable. But Anastasia, the murder investigation might not survive this. Without Madison's testimony about the insurance and search history, it's your word against theirs. After the call, I sat alone in my office as night fell over the city. Madison had played me perfectly, using my hope for family against me. She was truly her parents' daughter, shaped by their toxicity into a weapon aimed at anyone who threatened their empire of lies. But she'd miscalculated one thing. She thought exposing our humanity would weaken us. Instead, it had galvanized every person who'd ever been manipulated by a corporate narcissist. The comments on her video had shifted from shock to skepticism to outright support for our company. Marcus knocked and entered with his tablet. You need to see this. Someone leaked Madison's influencer contract from 3 years ago. the one where Daniel paid her $200,000 annually to do nothing. Compared to our intern's salary, it's not a good look for her. More leaks followed. Madison's expense reports charging $50,000 shopping sprees as market research. Videos of her previous meltdowns at hotels, screaming at staff. Former friends sharing stories of her cruelty. The internet, which had initially embraced her narrative, turned with vicious efficiency. "Should we stop this?" I asked Jennifer. "It feels like sinking to their level." "We're not orchestrating it," she pointed out. "People are tired of influencer manipulation. Madison made herself the story. Now she's learning what that really means." By week's end, Madison's betrayal had backfired spectacularly. Our employee retention hit an all-time high. Guest bookings increased. The board unanimously approved expanded employee benefit programs, explicitly citing the need to support staff whose privacy had been violated. Grace tried to salvage the situation with her own video, but her house arrest ankle monitor was visible in frame. Daniel's lawyers withdrew Madison as a witness after realizing her credibility was destroyed. She'd burned every bridge in pursuit of a viral moment and corporate sabotage. The last I heard, Madison had moved to Los Angeles trying to reinvent herself as a wellness influencer. Her follower count had crashed. Brands wanted nothing to do with her. The entertainment industry, which might have embraced scandal, saw only liability in someone who'd betrayed family for content. I didn't celebrate her downfall. If anything, I grieved for the sister I'd never had the relationship poisoned before it could begin. But I'd learned the hardest lesson of leadership: sometimes the greatest betrayals come from those we most want to trust. Madison had accused me of being like Daniel, of using people for my own ends. The accusation stung because every leader faces that temptation. The difference was choice. Daniel chose exploitation. I chose empowerment. Madison chose destruction. I chose building. In the end, her betrayal had only made us stronger. Every employee who'd wondered if I was genuine had their answer. Every guest who'd questioned our values had seen them tested and proven. Every competitor who'd hoped we'd implode had watched us unite instead. Madison thought she was exposing weakness. Instead, she'd revealed our greatest strength. We were exactly who we claimed to be. And that authenticity, rare in any industry, had become our unshakable foundation. The morning Daniel's criminal trial began, I woke to find news vans surrounding every one of our properties. Hotel Iris murder trial begins, scrolled across every business channel. The media circus we'd tried to avoid had come to town with a vengeance. I dressed carefully, professional, but not ostentatious, my mother's pearl earrings for strength, and made my way to the courthouse through a gauntlet of reporters. "Miss Fairchild, do you really believe your father killed your mother? Anastasia, is this all about revenge? How does it feel to destroy your own family?" I kept walking Jennifer beside me, saying nothing. Inside the courthouse, the scene was barely more dignified. The gallery was packed with journalists, curiosity seekers, and industry observers. Daniel sat at the defense table looking haggard but defiant, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the Armani suits he'd once worn. Grace sat in the front row, her designer outfit unable to hide the ankle monitor beneath. She'd been released on bail but faced her own trial for money laundering. Madison was notably absent, her failed betrayal having made her too toxic for even Daniel's defense team. Prosecutor Patricia Nielsen opened with devastating efficiency. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about greed, betrayal, and ultimately murder. Daniel Fairchild didn't just steal from his company and employees. He stole his daughter's inheritance, his workers' dignity, and finally, his wife's remaining days." The financial evidence came first. Forensic accountants detailed the systematic embezzlement, $47 million over 7 years. Pension funds drained, vendor payments diverted, employee tips stolen. The jury looked increasingly disgusted as the numbers piled up. Then came the employee testimony. Maria took the stand, first her voice steady as she described years of wage theft and intimidation. "Mr. Fairchild knew we couldn't afford lawyers. He counted on our fear to keep us silent." Carmen followed, detailing the predatory loan scheme. Single mothers, immigrants, anyone vulnerable, he targeted us specifically. Made us grateful for jobs while stealing our futures. By lunch, 20 employees had testified. The portrait they painted was damning a man who'd inherited wealth and used it to create a kingdom of exploitation. But the afternoon brought the testimony everyone had come for: the murder allegations. Tom Bradley took the stand, the former security chief, looking every one of his 70 years. He walked through that final night in excruciating detail: Eleanor's urgent call, the will signing, Daniel's 4 a.m. visit, the missing medical alert bracelet. "She was stable when I left at 2:30, Tom testified, talking about her plans for Anastasia, worried about what Daniel might do. When I saw him leaving her room at 4:15, he was carrying papers and her bracelet, the one she never took off." The defense attorney, a shark in a $1,000 suit, attacked immediately. "Mr. Bradley, isn't it true you were fired by Daniel Fairchild for drinking on the job?" "I retired voluntarily, and I've been sober for 6 years." "But you held a grudge. You blamed him for your career ending." "I blamed myself for not speaking up sooner. Mrs. Eleanor died thinking her daughter would be protected. I failed her then. I won't fail her now." The medical evidence was clinical but chilling. Eleanor's oncologist testified she'd had weeks, possibly months, to live. The sudden decline was unusual but not impossible with late-stage cancer. However, the morphine levels in her system were at the very highest end of therapeutic range. "Could someone have administered additional morphine?" Nielsen asked. "Objection," the defense attorney called. "Speculation." I'll rephrase. "Doctor, if someone had access to Mrs. Fairchild's IV line, could they have administered a fatal dose that would still appear within normal parameters?" The doctor hesitated. "Theoretically, yes. A skilled person could calculate a dose that would be fatal to a weakened patient, but not trigger immediate suspicion." The insurance documents were presented next. $20 million in life insurance purchased without Eleanor's knowledge, paid out within 30 days of her death. The signature was proven fake by 3 handwriting experts. Coincidence, the defense claimed. Mr. Fairchild was simply being prudent, protecting his family's future. But then came Grace's search history recovered from devices seized during the investigation. Morphine overdose symptoms. How long after death is autopsy performed? Life insurance claim timeline. All searched in the week before Eleanor's death. Grace, watching from the gallery, went pale as her digital footprints were displayed on courtroom screens. She tried to leave but was blocked by bailiffs. The media sketched furiously, capturing her trapped expression. Daniel's reaction was worse. As each piece of evidence mounted, his controlled facade cracked. When Nielsen showed security footage of him leaving Eleanor's room with the medical alert bracelet visible in his hand, he slammed his fist on the defense table. "She was dying anyway," he shouted before his lawyers could stop him. "The cancer was eating her alive. She was suffering." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly. Daniel's lawyers frantically tried to claim emotional distress, but the damage was done. He'd essentially confessed to hastening my mother's death. I sat frozen as chaos swirled around me. After 7 years of suspicion, hearing him admit it, even partially, was simultaneously vindicating and devastating. My mother's final hours stolen by the man she'd once loved. The judge called a recess. In the hallway, reporters swarmed anyone connected to the case. I escaped to a quiet alcove where Jennifer waited. "That's it," she said quietly. "His outburst just handed the prosecution their case. The jury won't forget that." "He killed her." The words came out hollow. I knew, but hearing him say it, he said she was suffering. His lawyers will claim mercy killing try for manslaughter instead of murder. Mercy. I laughed bitterly. He killed her for money, for $20 million and control of the company. There was no mercy in it. The trial continued for 2 more weeks. More evidence, more testimony, more revelations. Daniel's business associates distanced themselves publicly. Former board members claimed ignorance. The country club revoked his membership permanently. Grace's own trial began simultaneously creating a dual spectacle. She faced money laundering charges that her lawyer tried to blame on Daniel's influence. A woman standing by her husband, they claimed. But prosecutors had receipts literally, millions in personal expenses hidden as business costs, all bearing her signature. The media coverage was relentless. Dynasty of Greed headlined the business journals. Murder in the penthouse, screamed the tabloids. Our hotels were photographed constantly, every property becoming a backdrop for the scandal. I held daily calls with our management teams, ensuring operations continued smoothly despite the circus. Occupancy actually increased morbid curiosity, bringing guests who wanted to stay where the drama unfolded. We donated the extra profits to employee education funds, refusing to capitalize on tragedy. Madison attempted a comeback, posting a tearful video claiming she'd been manipulated by both sides. The internet destroyed her within hours, her credibility too shattered to rebuild. She deleted all her social media and disappeared from public view. The verdicts came on a Thursday. Daniel first guilty of first-degree murder, embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. The jury had deliberated only 6 hours. Life in prison without parole plus 200 years for the financial crimes. Grace's verdict followed guilty on all counts of money laundering and fraud. 15 years in federal prison, no possibility of early release. As the verdicts were read, I felt no satisfaction, only a hollow sense of completion. Justice had been served, but it couldn't bring back my mother or the 7 years stolen from me. Outside the courthouse, I finally spoke to the media. Today isn't about victory, it's about accountability. Daniel and Grace Fairchild betrayed every principle my mother stood for: integrity, compassion, service. But their actions don't define Fairchild Resorts anymore. Our 8,000 employees do. Our commitment to ethical business does. Eleanor Fairchild's true legacy isn't in a courthouse, it's in every guest served with dignity. Every employee treated with respect, every standard maintained with pride. "Will you visit your father in prison?" a reporter asked. No. Daniel Fairchild made his choices. He'll live with the consequences alone, just as he forced me to 7 years ago. My focus is on the future, not the past. The scandal's aftermath rippled through the industry. Competitors who'd operated similarly scrambled to reform, terrified of similar exposure. Business schools added the case to ethics curricula. Employee rights organizations used it to push for stronger protections. But the most meaningful response came from our own people. Employees organized a memorial for Eleanor at the Grandview, sharing stories of her kindness. Former staff who'd left during Daniel's reign returned. Industry professionals who'd avoided us during the scandal now sought partnerships. Tom Bradley attended the memorial, finally at peace after carrying his secret for 7 years. "She'd be proud," he told me simply, "not of the trials or the verdicts, but of what you've built from the ashes." Maria lit a candle for Eleanor. "She gave me a chance when I had nothing. Now you've given all of us a future. The circle is complete." That evening, I stood in my mother's garden at the Grandview, now restored to its former beauty. The scandal that was meant to destroy us had instead revealed our strength. Every sordid detail exposed in court only highlighted how far we'd come. Daniel had thought public shame would break me. Grace believed luxury and status were worth any price. Madison assumed viral fame meant real power. They'd all miscalculated the same thing: authentic values withstand any scandal. The media would move on to new stories. The public would forget the details. But 8,000 employees would remember that justice was possible, that exploitation didn't have to be accepted, that someone had stood up for them when it mattered. And somewhere I hoped my mother knew that her daughter had kept the promise made by a grieving 18-year-old to take back what was stolen and build something worthy of her sacrifice. The scandal was public. The pain was private. But the future, that belonged to everyone who'd chosen building over destroying truth, over lies, service, over selfishness. Eleanor Fairchild's real revenge wasn't the verdicts or the headlines. It was the empire of integrity rising from the ashes of corruption, and that empire would outlast any scandal. 6 months after the verdicts, with Daniel and Grace serving their sentences and the company thriving beyond all projections, I received an unexpected call from the federal prison system. Daniel had requested a meeting. His lawyer emphasized it wasn't about appeals or legal matters. He claimed to have information about my mother that I needed to hear. I almost refused, but something in the lawyer's tone suggested this was different. Against Jennifer's advice and my own instincts, I agreed to one meeting. The maximum security facility was a far cry from the luxury hotels Daniel had once ruled. I went through multiple checkpoints, surrendering my phone, submitting to searches, walking endless gray corridors that smelled of industrial disinfectant and despair. Daniel waited in a small conference room, shackled to the table. Prison had aged him dramatically. His hair, once perfectly styled, was now gray and thinning. The orange jumpsuit hung on a frame that had lost its country club softness. But his eyes still held that familiar arrogance, even diminished by circumstances. "You came," he said, attempting his old commanding tone. It fell flat in the institutional setting. "You have 5 minutes. What information about Mom?" "Straight to business, just like Eleanor." He shifted chains, clinking. "You think you know everything now. The trial laid it all out: greed, murder, betrayal. But you don't know why." "I know exactly why. 20 million in insurance and control of the company." "The money." He laughed bitterly. "You still don't understand. It was never about money. Your mother and I built an empire together. We were partners, equals. Then she got sick and everything changed." "Changed how?" She started talking about dismantling everything, giving away properties to employees, creating some socialist cooperative nonsense. She wanted to destroy what we'd spent 20 years building because she'd gotten sentimental about mortality. His fists clenched. I couldn't let her tear it all down in some deathbed conversion to charity. "So you killed her for the hotels?" "I saved the hotels." He lunged forward as far as the chains allowed. She was going to give it all away, every property, every asset. Her new will, the real one Tom showed you, that was just the beginning. She had lawyers working on dissolving the entire company structure, converting everything to employee ownership. She'd have died a saint and left you with nothing but good intentions. I processed this revelation. "You're lying. Mom believed in the business. She believed in people more, always her weakness. When she got sick, she decided legacy meant making everyone else rich, while her own daughter got philosophy instead of fortune." He leaned back. "I did you a favor. At least you got 12 million instead of watching it all given away to maids and bellboys. Those maids and bellboys built the company as much as you did. See, you're just like her, soft, sentimental. But at least you're smart enough to keep the business intact while playing benefactor. Eleanor would have destroyed everything." "Is that what you tell yourself? That murder was a business decision?" "It was mercy." His voice dropped. "She was dying anyway, in pain, talking about dismantling our life's work. I gave her peace and saved her legacy, until you came along and ruined it all anyway. I fulfilled her vision, not yours." Her vision was hallucination. Morphine and cancer eating her brain, making her think she could buy heaven by giving away earth. He studied me intently. "But you want to know the real reason I asked you here. It wasn't to justify myself. It's to warn you." "Warn me?" "Grace isn't done. She has resources hidden that prosecutors never found. Offshore accounts in her brother's name. Connections you don't know about. She's planning something from prison. Has been for months." "Why would you tell me this?" "Because she's targeting the hotels, not just you. Whatever else I am, I built those properties. I won't watch her destroy them out of spite." He paused. "And because you're still my daughter. Eleanor's daughter. Maybe the only good thing either of us ever made. I stood to leave. If you have specific information about Grace's plans, tell the prosecutors. Otherwise, we're done here. Anastasia. His voice stopped me at the door. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd just let her give it all away? If I'd supported her final wishes instead of... He trailed off. Every day, I admitted without turning. We'd have lost the hotels but kept our family. Mom would have had peaceful final months. You'd be a grieving widower instead of a convicted killer. And maybe eventually we'd have built something new together. But would you have become who you are now, strong enough to run an empire, smart enough to outmaneuver corporate sharks? Sometimes the worst things shape us into our best selves. I finally turned to face him. That's what you tell yourself to live with what you did. But you're wrong. I became who I am, despite you, not because of you. Every cruelty you inflicted just taught me how not to lead. Every betrayal showed me the value of loyalty. You didn't forge me, Daniel. You just showed me exactly who I never wanted to be. His face crumpled slightly. For a moment, I saw the man my mother might have loved before greed consumed him. The information about Grace is real, he said quietly. Her brother Marcus, not your Marcus. Different one has been moving money through shell companies. They're planning to buy distressed properties near ours, create competing hotels designed to undercut our prices and poach our staff. She calls it Project Phoenix. I absorbed this. Why should I believe you? Because I gain nothing from lying now. I'll die in here. Grace will too. But Madison... He hesitated. Madison's working with them. She thinks if she helps Grace destroy what you've built, she'll finally get her inheritance. They're using her again, and she's too desperate to see it. When? Soon, within the month. They've been waiting for you to feel secure to let your guard down. The peace was always temporary, Anastasia. Grace doesn't forgive. Ever. I left without another word. In the parking lot, I called Marcus immediately. We need a full financial security review. Every competitor, every property, purchase every new development within 50 miles of our hotels, and find out everything about Marcus Winters, Grace's brother. The investigation took 2 weeks. Daniel's information proved accurate. Shell companies in the Caymans were accumulating capital. Property purchases were being negotiated through intermediaries. Former employees, mostly those fired for cause, were being recruited with promises of management positions. But the real shock came when we discovered the funding source, a group of investors who'd lost money when we'd exposed various hospitality industry schemes. They saw Grace's revenge plan as an opportunity to damage our reputation and recoup losses. Madison was indeed involved, though surveillance showed her looking increasingly haggard and uncertain. She'd been promised CEO position of the new chain, but even she seemed to realize the impossibility of competing with 60 established properties using only spite as a business model. I convened a war council with my senior leadership. They're planning to announce on the anniversary of Daniel's conviction, maximum media impact, properties in 12 locations, all adjacent to ours, all offering rates 20% below our costs. They'll hemorrhage money, our CFO calculated. No sustainable business model, it's a kamikaze run. That's the point. They don't care about profit. They want to force us into a price war damage our brand maybe grab enough market share to sell to our competitors. I pulled up the property maps, but they've made a crucial mistake. Jennifer saw it first. The zoning. Half these properties aren't zoned for hotels. They'd need variance approvals that could take years. And the other half are in historic districts with strict renovation guidelines. They're planning to use Grace's flashy style, which will never get approved. Marcus grinned. They've spent millions on properties they can't legally convert. Unless, I said slowly, someone helps them navigate the regulations, shows them how to work within restrictions, maybe even partners with them on development. The room went silent, then erupted. Partner with Grace. Are you insane? She tried to destroy us. This is corporate Stockholm Syndrome. I raise my hand for silence. Not partner, acquire. Let them spend their investors' money on properties and initial development. When they realize the impossibility of their plan, and they will, we offer to buy them out, turn their revenge into our expansion. You want to let them fail, then swoop in, Jennifer asked. I want to give them every opportunity to succeed legitimately. Offer Madison a real position with real mentorship. Show Grace's investors that cooperation yields better returns than competition. Transform enemies into allies, or at least neutralize them. The strategy was risky, but it aligned with everything my mother and Arthur had taught me. Turn obstacles into opportunities, enemies into educators, revenge into renewal. I reached out through intermediaries offering to meet with Grace's investment group. They were suspicious but curious. The meeting was set for Neutral Ground, a conference center owned by neither chain. Grace's brother Marcus led their delegation. He had her sharp features but lacked her polish, a mid-level schemer trying to play in the big leagues. Madison sat beside him, designer clothes, not quite hiding her exhaustion. Ms. Fairchild. Marcus began aggressively. We're here to inform you that Winter's Hospitality Group will be launching next month. Your monopoly on luxury hotels in this region is over. Congratulations on your new venture, I replied calmly. I'm actually here to propose something that might benefit both our organizations. We don't need anything from you, Madison interjected, but her voice lacked conviction. No, then you've already figured out the zoning issues in Burlington, the historic preservation requirements in Charleston, the environmental impact studies required in Denver. I slid folders across the table. These are the regulatory challenges for your 12 properties. At minimum, you're looking at 3 years before you can break ground on half of them. Marcus's bravado faltered as he scanned the documents. The investors behind him exchanged worried glances. However, I continued, Hartwell Fairchild has excellent relationships with these regulatory bodies. We could help expedite approvals, share our architectural plans that have already passed historic review, even provide training for your staff. I paused. For a price. What price? An investor asked sharply. Equity stake, say 40%. You get operating hotels years faster. We get expansion opportunities without bidding wars. Everyone wins. This is a trick, Madison said. You're trying to control us like you control everything else. Madison, I said gently, I'm trying to save you from making the same mistakes your parents did. Building a business on revenge is like building on sand. It might stand briefly, but it won't last. I looked at each investor. You've been promised returns based on damaging us, but damage doesn't pay dividends. Success does. The lead investor, a sharp woman named Patricia Stone, spoke up. What guarantee do we have that you won't sabotage us after we've invested millions? Because sabotage isn't profitable. Your success near our properties could create hospitality districts that benefit everyone. Rising tides lifted boats. I stood. Take a week. Review the regulatory files. Check our track record of partnership deals. Then decide if you want to spend 3 years fighting bureaucracy and us, or 1 year building something valuable together. The meeting ended with handshakes instead of hostility. Madison lingered as others filed out. This is really just about business for you, she asked quietly. No, it's about proving that there's a better way, that we don't have to repeat our parents' patterns. Grace and Daniel chose destruction. We can choose differently. Even after everything I did, especially after, Madison, you've been programmed for betrayal since childhood. Breaking that programming takes time and opportunity. I'm offering both. She nodded slowly, then followed the others out. I didn't know if she'd accept the offer or double down on revenge, but I'd planted the seed. A week later, Patricia Stone called. The investor group had voted to accept our partnership proposal. Marcus raged and threatened to find other backers. Madison remained silent, watching. The final confrontation came not in a boardroom, but in a coffee shop. Madison asked to meet privately, no lawyers or recording devices. I'm tired, she admitted, stirring her untouched latte. Tired of fighting, scheming, pretending. Grace calls from prison daily, feeding me strategies. Dad sends letters about reclaiming our birthright. But watching you this past year, you just keep building. No matter what we throw at you, you turn it into something positive. It's exhausting sometimes, I admitted, but it's better than the alternative, which is becoming them, letting bitterness define us, choosing destruction over creation. I met her eyes. You still have a choice, Madison. Grace's path leads to prison. Mine leads to possibility. Your path requires me to admit I was wrong about everything. No, it requires you to admit you can be different going forward. The past is done. The future isn't. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, the partnership deal. Would there be a place for me? A real place, not just window dressing. Assistant Director of Digital Marketing. Report to our CMO, not me. Earn your promotions like everyone else. Build something you can be proud of instead of infamous for. And if I fail, then you fail attempting something worthwhile instead of succeeding at something destructive. That's still a win. Madison extended her hand across the table. Okay, I'm in. For real this time. No recordings, no betrayals, no schemes. Just work. We shook hands, two daughters of a poisoned legacy, choosing to plant new gardens instead of salting the earth. The confrontation I'd expected, legal battles, corporate warfare, mutual destruction, never materialized. Instead, we'd transformed enemies into allies through the radical act of offering success instead of demanding surrender. Grace raged from prison when she heard. Daniel sent one last letter calling me weak, but their opinions no longer mattered. The final confrontation wasn't with them, it was with the choice to become them or transcend them. We'd chosen transcendence, and in that choice, my mother's true legacy lived on the belief that business could be both profitable and principled, that enemies could become educators, that building together beat destroying alone. The war was over. The building had begun. With the external battles won and former enemies becoming allies, I turned my full attention to what mattered most, transforming our properties into living embodiments of my mother's vision. The Grandview Resort, where this journey began, would be our flagship renovation, not just in facilities, but in philosophy. I gathered all 60 property managers for a week-long summit at the Grandview. These were the people who'd make or break our transformation. Half had worked under Daniel's regime, the other half came from Hartwell's culture. Merging them into a unified vision would take more than presentations. We're not here to talk about renovations. I opened standing in the same ballroom where Daniel had once held court. We're here to reimagine what a hotel can be. Not just a place to sleep, but a community anchor. Not just a business, but a force for good. Maria, now Regional Director of Operations, presented first. Employee ownership isn't just about shares, it's about mindset. When every housekeeper knows they're building their own futures, not just cleaning rooms, everything changes. We'd structured the employee ownership program carefully. 20% of company equity distributed based on tenure and performance. Profit sharing that meant a good year for the company meant college funds for employees' children. But most importantly, decision-making power at every level. I want to show you something. Maria continued pulling up before and after videos. This is the Riverside property 6 months ago. The footage showed exhausted staff peeling paint, guests complaining. Standard metrics under Daniel's cost-cutting leadership. And this is today. The transformation was remarkable. Employees moved with energy and pride. The property gleamed. But the real difference was in the small details, staff members greeting guests by name, fresh flowers in every room, handwritten welcome notes. Same budget, Maria emphasized. Different approach. When people own their work, they don't need supervision. They need support. Tom Chen, the former Hartwell manager now overseeing our Pacific properties, stood next. Let's talk about community integration. Hotels shouldn't be islands of privilege surrounded by local poverty. They should lift entire neighborhoods. His properties had pioneered our local sourcing initiative. 80% of supplies from businesses within 20 miles, job training programs for neighborhood youth, meeting spaces offered free to community organizations. The hotels had become genuine community partners. Initial costs were higher, Tom admitted, but occupancy is up 30%. Turns out guests prefer hotels that reflect their values. Day after day, managers shared innovations. The Mountain View property had converted unused conference rooms into after-school tutoring centers. The Lakeside had partnered with culinary schools to create apprenticeship programs. The Valley Gardens hosted weekly farmers markets in their parking lots. But transformation meant confronting past mistakes too. I insisted we acknowledge the damage done during Daniel's era. Every employee who was cheated deserves personal acknowledgement, I announced. Not just repayment, but recognition. We're creating the Eleanor Fairchild Memorial Fund, $5 million annually for employee hardship assistance. Medical bills, family emergencies, educational opportunities. No questions asked, just help when needed. Carmen, now heading our new Hospitality Training Institute, presented the education initiatives. Every employee gets 40 hours annual paid education leave, tuition reimbursement for any hospitality-related degree, and this, she clicked to show architectural plans, is our new training center, built where Daniel's private wine cellar used to be. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Where Daniel had hoarded luxury, we'd create opportunity. The renovation plans themselves reflected our values. Grace's gaudy penthouses became employee wellness centers. Madison's Instagram-worthy party suites transformed into childcare facilities. Daniel's executive floors opened as co-working spaces for local entrepreneurs. But what about luxury? Asked one longtime manager nervously. Our guests expect exclusivity. They'll get it, I assured him. But luxury redefined. Not isolation from community, but integration with it. Not service extracted from employees, but excellence freely given by partners. Watch. I showed them letters from guests over the past months. A CEO praising how energized our staff seemed. A family touched by employees who'd gone above and beyond because they wanted to, not because they had to. Corporate clients choosing us specifically for our values. True luxury. I explained is staying somewhere that treats everyone beautifully, from the guest in the penthouse to the person cleaning it. Madison, in her new legitimate role, presented digital initiatives that actually served purposes beyond vanity metrics. Virtual tours highlighting employee stories, social campaigns celebrating local partnerships, booking systems that showed exactly how stays supported communities. Authenticity drives engagement, she said, clearly nervous, presenting to skeptical veterans. When we stopped manufacturing moments and started capturing real ones, our online presence exploded. Positive mentions up 400%. The biggest transformation was physical. We committed $200 million to renovations over 2 years, but not the cosmetic fixes Grace had favored. Deep infrastructure improvements, solar panels, water recycling systems, energy-efficient everything. Rooms designed for genuine comfort, not just photogenic angles. Marcus coordinated with Patricia Stone's investment group, now our partners, rather than competitors. Their properties would complement ours, creating destination districts that benefited everyone. 12 new hotels, all following our standards, he reported. Employee ownership from day one. Community integration built into design. We're not just expanding, but evangelizing. The week culminated in a ceremony I hadn't planned. Employees from every property had secretly coordinated to create something extraordinary. They'd commissioned a portrait of my mother, not the formal one from corporate halls, but a collage made from thousands of photos showing her with staff over the years. Maria presented it as 800 employees watched via video link. Eleanor Fairchild saw us. Now we see her in everything we do. But the transformation's true test came with results. 6 months into renovations, metrics told the story. Employee retention 97%, guest satisfaction highest in company history, revenue per room up 23%, community partnership requests overwhelming, industry awards 17 and counting. The business media took notice. The Fairchild miracle, they called it, analyzing how we'd turned a scandal-plagued chain into an industry leader through radical employee empowerment and community capitalism. I gave few interviews, preferring to let results speak, but when the Harvard Business Review requested a feature, I agreed on condition they interview employees too. The resulting article showcased Carmen explaining how ownership changed her family's life, Tom Chen describing community partnerships, Madison reflecting on transformation from influencer to professional, and Maria summarizing what we'd built: hotels where everyone matters equally. Competitors scrambled to copy our model, offering surface-level employee perks without fundamental change. But transformation couldn't be faked. It required genuine power sharing, authentic community connection, and leaders willing to serve rather than rule. The ultimate validation came from an unexpected source. Judge Harrison, who'd helped Daniel with the asset freeze, reached out through intermediaries. He was retiring, ashamed of his role in enabling corruption. He wanted to establish a scholarship fund for hospitality workers' children as penance. Tell Ms. Fairchild, his message read, that watching her transform betrayal into benefit has haunted my conscience. I chose connections over justice. She chose justice and created connections. I hope this small gesture helps balance the scales. We accepted his donation but named it after employees who'd suffered under the corruption he'd enabled. Even penance could serve transformation if directed properly. Standing in the completed Grandview renovation, I found myself in the garden where everything had started. The marble gleamed, the technology impressed, but the real change was intangible: energy, pride, purpose. Maria found me there as the sun set. Your mother would be amazed. We've built what she dreamed but never got to see. No, I corrected gently. She saw it. In every employee she treated with respect, every guest served with grace, every standard maintained despite pressure. We just scaled her vision to match her heart. And your father is serving life while we're serving others. He built a monument to ego. We've built a movement of empowerment. His legacy ends with him. Ours grows with every person who experiences what hospitality can truly be. That evening, I walked every floor of the transformed hotel. In the Employee Wellness Center, staff relaxed between shifts. In the childcare facility, workers' children did homework while parents finished duties. In the community meeting spaces, local organizations planned neighborhood improvements. In the presidential suite, once Grace's personal shopping storage, a family celebrated a grandmother's 90th birthday. 3 generations gathered, choosing us not for ostentation, but for the warmth they felt from every interaction. The transformation was complete yet ongoing. Every day brought new ideas from empowered employees. Every month revealed new ways hotels could serve beyond lodging. Every year would build on foundations of respect rather than exploitation. Daniel had seen hotels as possessions to extract from. Grace viewed them as stages for performance. Madison had used them as backdrops for digital fame. But Eleanor Fairchild had understood their true nature: communities of service where everyone could thrive. We'd simply returned to her vision expanded for modern times, and in doing so, we'd proven that business transformation wasn't about changing surfaces, but souls. Not about imposing new rules, but unleashing existing potential. The hotel transformation was really human transformation, and that more than any renovation or award was the true monument to my mother's legacy. The federal investigation into Daniel and Grace's crimes had uncovered a labyrinth of hidden assets that prosecutors were still untangling 2 years after the convictions. I was in my office reviewing expansion plans when Detective Patricia Morse called with unexpected news. Anastasia, we need to meet. We've discovered something significant about your parents' asset structure. Can you come to the federal building this afternoon? I found Detective Morse in a conference room wallpapered with financial documents, flowcharts, and photographs of properties I didn't recognize. Two FBI financial analysts sat at laptops cross-referencing databases with focused intensity. "What you're looking at," Detective Morse began, "is the real Fairchild empire. What you knew about was maybe 60% of it." My legs felt weak as I sank into a chair. "What do you mean?" "Your father was paranoid about taxes and potential lawsuits. Starting 15 years ago, he began hiding assets through shell companies, offshore accounts, and straw purchasers. Grace accelerated this after their marriage. We've identified approximately $300 million in hidden assets." 300 million. The number seemed impossible. How the company books were fiction. He maintained two sets, one for investors, and taxes another, reflecting reality. But here's the interesting part. She pulled out a folder marked with my mother's name. Eleanor knew. She was documenting everything. Inside were bank records, property deeds, and handwritten notes in my mother's careful script. She'd tracked every hidden transaction, every diverted fund building evidence she never got to use. "We found this in a safety deposit box registered to her maiden name," Detective Morse explained. "She was building a case against Daniel. We think she planned to divorce him and expose everything, but the cancer progressed faster than expected." I studied my mother's notes, seeing her intelligence and determination in every line. She'd known what Daniel was becoming and tried to protect the company and me from his greed. "The assets are subject to forfeiture," Detective Morse continued. "But as the primary victim of the crimes you have first claim, we're talking about properties in 5 countries, art collections, vintage car collections, even a yacht registered in the Bahamas." "I don't want toys bought with stolen money," I said immediately. "That's refreshing. Most victims want everything they can get, but there's more. The FBI wants to propose a deal. Help us unravel the full network, identify all assets, and testify about the company's legitimate operations. In exchange, you get accelerated access to recovered assets for victim restitution." Victim restitution. Not just you. Every employee Daniel cheated, every vendor he stiffed, every investor he defrauded. You could make them all whole and still have hundreds of millions for corporate use. I spent the next 3 months working with federal investigators, using my knowledge of the company to decode Daniel's schemes. Each revealed asset told a story of greed. A Swiss chalet bought the year he'd cut employee bonuses, claiming poverty. A Miami penthouse purchased while delaying vendor payments. Portuguese vineyards acquired using embezzled pension funds. Grace's hidden assets were equally appalling, but showed her particular brand of avarice. An entire warehouse of designer goods never worn, jewelry collections that could fund small countries, art bought not for beauty, but for bragging rights stored in climate-controlled vaults. She never even looked at them, the lead investigator marveled, just acquired and hoarded. Madison, when approached by investigators, proved surprisingly helpful. Her therapy had apparently included confronting her parents' influence, and she provided passwords to digital accounts they'd used for money transfers. "I found something else," she told me during one joint session with investigators. "Dad's private server. He kept videos of meetings where he planned the embezzlement. I think he wanted leverage over his co-conspirators." The videos were damning. Daniel brazenly discussing stealing employee tips, Grace calculating how to inflate renovation budgets, board members who'd claimed ignorance clearly participating in fraud. Madison had inadvertently provided evidence that expanded the investigation to a dozen other individuals. As assets were recovered and liquidated, I worked with Jennifer to structure the restitution program. Every employee who'd been cheated would receive back wages with interest. Vendors would be paid in full. The pension fund would be restored to overflowing. Total restitution amount $47 million, Jennifer calculated. That leaves approximately $250 million in recovered assets after liquidation. It goes to the employees, I decided. Bonuses for current staff, expanded benefits, the training institute Carmen runs. scholarships for every employee's child who wants higher education. All of it. Jennifer seemed stunned. You could personally claim at least half. I have enough, more than enough. This money was stolen from people who couldn't fight back. It returns to them. The announcement of the restitution program created waves throughout the industry. We held ceremonies at each property where employees received their checks. Maria cried when she got hers, $15,000 in stolen tips, repaid with interest. "This pays off my mortgage," she whispered. 20 years of payments gone. I own my home free and clear because you kept fighting for us. Carmen's Training Institute received $50 million in funding, enough to offer free hospitality education for decades. Tom Chen used property recovery funds to expand community partnerships. Marcus managed the scholarship program that would send thousands of employees' children to college. But the most significant recovery came from an unexpected source. While investigating one of Daniel's shell companies, analysts found property records for a small boutique hotel in Vermont. The address seemed familiar, and when I pulled up photographs, my heart stopped. It was the inn where my parents had met, the place my mother had talked about constantly during her illness, describing their first dance in the garden, their wedding reception in the ballroom. Daniel had bought it secretly years ago, planning to demolish it for condos. "It's yours," Detective Morse informed me, "purchased with embezzled funds, so it's subject to recovery. But given the personal connection..." I drove to Vermont immediately. The property was smaller than memory suggested, weathered by neglect but still standing. The garden where my parents had danced was overgrown. The ballroom where they'd married needed everything. But the bones were good, the history intact. In the manager's office, I found files Daniel had never bothered to examine, guest books going back 40 years, photographs of events including my parents' wedding, and in a dusty box, my mother's personal effects from her visits, their letters to my father from their courtship, pressed flowers from their wedding, even the guest book she'd signed the night they met. Her handwriting from decades ago was optimistic innocent, magical evening at the Evergreen Inn, can't wait to return with someone special, Eleanor Sheffield. She had returned with Daniel. They'd built a life, a business, a family. Then greed had poisoned everything, turning love into possession, partnership into exploitation. I made the decision instantly. The Evergreen Inn would be restored not as a Hartwell Fairchild property, but as something unique, a living museum of ethical hospitality, a place where industry professionals could learn not just service standards, but the values that should underpin them. "We'll run it as a nonprofit," I explained to the team. "Break-even operations, all profits to hospitality worker relief funds. And the garden where my parents met, we'll open it for weddings at cost for any employee of any hotel who wants to marry there." The restoration became a company-wide project. Employees volunteered labor, guests donated to the cause. Even competitors contributed, recognizing the symbol we were creating, love, could build empires, but only values could sustain them. 6 months later, we held the grand reopening. Former employees who'd worked there during my parents' courtship returned to share stories. Industry leaders toured the facility, studying our model of nonprofit hospitality. The first wedding in the restored garden was Maria's daughter marrying her college sweetheart under the same arbor where Daniel had proposed to Eleanor. I stood in the ballroom where my parents had danced at their wedding, now filled with employees, celebrating not just restoration but redemption. Every recovered asset had been transformed from symbol of greed to tool of generosity. "You could have been unimaginably wealthy," Marcus observed, watching scholarship recipients thank donors. "No one would have blamed you for keeping more." "I am unimaginably wealthy," I replied. "I have 8,000 partners who trust me, properties that serve communities, a legacy my mother would recognize. What's a yacht compared to that?" That evening, after the celebrations ended, I walked alone through the Evergreen Inn. In the manager's office, I opened the safe Daniel had installed. Inside, along with property documents, was an envelope addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. Daniel must have hidden it here, thinking it would never be found. The letter inside was dated a week before her death. My dearest Anastasia, if you're reading this, you've found your way back to where it all began. I'm hiding this here because I know Daniel will never return to face our history. I need you to know that despite everything, I don't regret loving your father. He gave me you, and you were worth any pain. But I do regret not being strong enough to stop what he became. The assets he's hidden aren't just money. They're trust-betrayed futures, stolen communities weakened. If you ever recover them, don't let them corrupt you, too. Use them to heal what he broke. Build something worthy of the love that created you, not the greed that tried to destroy you. Remember that true wealth isn't what you hold, but what you share. All my love, Mom. I held the letter to my chest, tears falling freely. Even facing death, even knowing Daniel's betrayal, she'd thought of others first. She'd understood that recovery wasn't about reclaiming assets, but restoring justice. Every dollar recovered, every employee made whole, every student educated, with funds that once fed greed, all of it was my mother's final victory. Not through courts or investigators, but through values so strong they survived even those who tried to corrupt them. The asset recovery was complete, but more importantly, the moral recovery was absolute. We'd transformed symbols of exploitation into engines of empowerment. We'd proven that justice delayed didn't have to mean justice denied. And in a small inn, where love once bloomed before greed poisoned it, hope grew again in a garden tended by hundreds of hands, all working toward the same simple goal, proving that business could be better, wealth could be worthy, and even the deepest corruption could be cleaned by consistent care. Eleanor Fairchild had won, not through revenge but through redemption, not by destroying but by building, not alone but through everyone who chose creation over corruption. The assets were recovered, the values were restored, the future was bright with possibility. The federal courthouse was packed for Daniel's sentencing hearing. 2 years of investigations and trials had led to this moment. I sat in the front row, Jennifer beside me, surrounded by employees who'd taken personal days to witness justice being served. Daniel entered in shackles, the designer suits replaced by federal prison gray. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen: defeat, total, absolute defeat. Judge Catherine Morrison, known for her no-nonsense approach to white-collar crime, reviewed the charges. First-degree murder, embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. The list seemed endless, each count representing lives, damaged trust, betrayed futures stolen. Before I passed sentence, Judge Morrison said, "I'll hear from those affected by Mr. Fairchild's crimes. Ms. Anastasia Fairchild, you may speak first." I'd prepared remarks, worked with Jennifer on exactly what to say. But standing at the podium, looking at the man who'd been my father, I set aside the script. "Your Honor, I'm not here to seek vengeance. I'm here to seek clarity. For years, I wondered what turned a man who once danced with my mother in a garden into someone who could steal her final breaths for money. What transforms love into possession, partnership into exploitation, family into transaction, I looked directly at Daniel. He couldn't meet my eyes. The answer is simple choice. Every day, Daniel Fairchild chose greed over grace. He chose taking over giving. He chose himself over everyone else. And those choices compounded until murder seemed like just another business decision. But I'm also here to speak for those who chose differently. 800 employees who chose loyalty despite exploitation. Vendors who chose patience despite theft. Investors who chose trust despite deception. They're the real victims, and they're also the real heroes. Daniel stole $47 million over 7 years, but what he really stole was harder to quantify: dignity from workers, security from families, hope from communities. That's the true crime we're addressing today. Your Honor, I don't ask for the maximum sentence out of hatred. I ask for it out of love. Love for every person who deserves to know that justice exists, that exploitation has consequences, that choosing evil over good leads somewhere specific here, in chains facing the truth of what those choices created. I returned to my seat as employees testified one by one. Maria spoke of wages stolen while her children went hungry. Carmen described the predatory loans that trapped families in cycles of debt. Tom Bradley, voice-breaking, told of carrying guilt for 7 years because he'd been too afraid to speak truth about Eleanor's death. Then came the other defendants. Grace's brother, facing his own charges, tried to claim he'd been manipulated. Former board members insisted they'd been deceived, each attempting to minimize their role shift, avoid consequences. But the evidence was overwhelming. The videos Madison had provided showed willing participation. The financial records revealed full knowledge. The recovered assets proved systematic, deliberate crime. When Grace's sentencing came next, she maintained her performance to the end. Designer clothes replaced by prison uniform, she still attempted dignity. But as employees testified about her cruelty, her careful facade cracked. She used to make us stand in line while she inspected our appearances, one housekeeper testified. Any imperfection meant docked pay. She said we were representing her personal standards. She charged personal shopping trips as business expenses while cutting our health benefits. Another explained. Told us insurance was a luxury we hadn't earned. Grace's lawyer tried painting her as a woman trapped in her husband's schemes. But prosecutor Patricia Nielsen methodically presented evidence-forged signatures, hidden accounts, that damning search history about morphine overdoses. When I spoke at Grace's sentencing, I focused on a different betrayal. Grace Winters Fairchild had everything: wealth, status, opportunity. She could have been a force for good, could have honored the legacy she married into. Instead, she saw Eleanor Fairchild's life's work as a personal piggy bank. She didn't just steal money. She stole joy from work, pride from service, dignity from labor. She turned hotels that should have been communities into kingdoms where she played queen while subjects suffered. But her greatest crime was teaching Madison that worth came from wealth, value from vanity, power from performance. She created a daughter as damaged as she was perpetuating cycles of narcissism that poisoned generations. Madison attended both sentencing hearings. She sat apart from everyone, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. When offered the chance to speak, she surprised everyone by taking it. "I'm not here to defend them," she began, voice shaking. "I'm here to apologize. To Anastasia, who tried to give me chances I threw away. To employees I treated as props for content. To everyone who suffered while I played influencer with stolen money. My parents taught me that taking was winning, that caring was weakness, that authenticity was for people who couldn't afford artifice. They were wrong about everything, and following their path led me to lose everything that mattered. I can't undo my choices, but I can make different ones going forward. I'm in therapy, real therapy. I'm working a normal job, earning honest money. I'm learning who I am without followers, without filters, without facades." She looked at Daniel and Grace. "You're going to prison for your crimes. I'm already in one, the prison of being raised by people who love themselves more than their children. But I'm working on parole through accountability, something you both could have chosen but never did." The sentences were severe but justified. Daniel, life without parole for murder, plus 200 years for financial crimes. Grace, 45 years for her role in the conspiracy. Other defendants received sentences ranging from 5 to 20 years. As they were led away, Daniel finally looked at me. For a moment, I saw something that might have been regret, but then his jaw hardened and he turned away, still choosing pride over peace even now. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed, but I pushed through to where employees had gathered. These were the people who mattered, who'd waited years for this moment. "It's over," Maria said, tears streaming. "It's really over." "No," I corrected gently. The crime is over. The punishment is delivered. But what we build next, that's just beginning. That evening, we held a memorial for Eleanor at the Evergreen Inn. Not a service we'd done that years ago, but a celebration of justice served and futures reclaimed. Employees shared stories of her kindness. Former colleagues remembered her vision. Industry leaders acknowledged her pioneering spirit. I spoke last standing in the garden where everything began. Eleanor Fairchild believed business could be noble, that success meant lifting others, that legacy lived in lives touched, rather than dollars accumulated. Daniel betrayed that belief. Grace corrupted it. Madison marketed it without understanding it. But we lived it. Every employee who stayed honest despite temptation, every manager who chose service over selfishness, every guest who experienced genuine hospitality. We're Eleanor's legacy, not despite the darkness, but because we chose light. Today's sentences don't bring her back. They don't erase 7 years of exploitation or undo damage done, but they affirm that choices have consequences, that justice exists, that building beats destroying in the end. So tomorrow we continue building. Hotels where everyone matters, communities where business serves, futures where children of employees have more opportunities than their parents dreamed. That's our justice. That's our revenge. That's our love made manifest in measurable ways. The gathering lasted past midnight. Stories shared tears, shed bonds strengthened. Madison approached as things wound down, hesitant but determined. "I know I have no right to ask," she began, "but could I hear stories about Aunt Eleanor, real ones, not the sanitized versions my parents told?" So we sat in the garden under stars Eleanor once wished upon, and I told my sister about our mother, not the St. Daniel had murdered or the fool Grace had mocked, but the complex, caring, brilliant woman who'd built an empire on empathy. Madison listened without interrupting, without recording, without performing, just absorbing truth she'd been denied understanding, finally what had been stolen from all of us. "I'll never be her daughter," Madison said quietly. "That chance was taken before I was born, but maybe I can still be her granddaughter. Maybe I can still choose differently." "You already are," I assured her. "Every day you choose accountability over excuse. Every time you pick truth over performance. Every moment you decide to build rather than blame. That's Eleanor Fairchild's DNA asserting itself despite everything." The night ended with unexpected peace. Not forgiveness, some things cut too deep for that, but acceptance that justice had been served, choices had consequences, and futures remained unwritten for those brave enough to change. Daniel would die in prison choosing bitterness to the end. Grace would serve decades her designer life reduced to regulated routine. But Madison might yet become someone worth knowing, might prove that even poisoned roots could produce different fruit if tended carefully. The reckoning was complete. Not just legal verdicts, but moral ones. Not just punishment delivered, but patterns broken. Not just justice for the dead, but possibility for the living. In the garden where love began before greed corrupted it, hope bloomed again, tended by hundreds who'd chosen building over bitterness, creation, over corruption, service, over selfishness. Eleanor Fairchild had been murdered for money, but her true wealth, the values she'd planted in everyone she'd touched, had survived and thrived and multiplied beyond any calculation. That was the real reckoning evil exposed, punished, and transcended by good that refused to die. In the end, love won by lasting longer, reaching further, and building higher than hate ever could. The gavel had fallen. The sentences were served. But the story continued with every choice to be better than our wounds, bigger than our betrayals, and braver than our fears. Justice was done. Life went on. And somewhere, Eleanor smiled. 2 years after the trials ended, I stood in the lobby of the Grandview Resort, watching something I'd never imagined possible. Daniel's former country club friends checking in for our annual Ethics and Hospitality Conference. The men who'd once enabled his corruption now paid to learn better ways. Strange world, Marcus observed, joining me with coffee. Half these people wouldn't speak to you 3 years ago. People change, I replied, watching Judge Harrison, now retired, and remorseful help Maria set up registration tables. Or at least they can if given the chance. The conference was Madison's idea, pitched during one of our monthly lunches that had slowly rebuilt our relationship. We keep talking about transformation, she'd argued. Why not teach it? Show the industry how we turned scandal into success. She'd been right. Requests for our business model poured in constantly. Rather than hoard knowledge, we decided to share it. 3 days of sessions on employee ownership, community integration, and ethical leadership, all profits to our worker education fund. The opening session filled the ballroom where Daniel had once held court. I recognized faces from across the industry, competitors, journalists, academics, even government regulators studying our approach. Welcome to what my mother would have called revolution through room service. I opened, getting laughs. You're here because you believe business can be better. We're here to prove you're right. The sessions were deliberately transparent. Carmen showed our real financial models, proving employee ownership increased rather than decreased profits. Tom Chen demonstrated community partnerships that created competitive advantages. Madison presented digital strategies that built brand through authenticity rather than artifice. But the most powerful session was the employee panel. Maria, now part owner of the company she'd once cleaned for minimum wage, spoke eloquently about dignity in labor. A young manager who'd started as a bellhop through our education program described opportunities that changed his family's trajectory. Even former employees who'd left for other opportunities returned to share how our values had influenced their new workplaces. The Fairchild model isn't just about hotels, one concluded. It's about believing people rise to the level of trust you give them. The conference's final dinner was held in the garden my mother had designed. Senator Patricia Chen, who'd once investigated us for antitrust concerns, now delivered the keynote as our biggest advocate. What Anastasia Fairchild and her team have built isn't just a business success, she told the assembled leaders. It's a blueprint for capitalism that serves rather than exploits. They've proven that treating workers as partners rather than costs communities as stakeholders, rather than resources, creates sustainable success. And they did it, she continued, not from privilege but from persecution, not through inheritance but through intelligence, not by destroying the old but by building the new. If they can transform betrayal into benefit, what excuse do the rest of us have? The applause was genuine, but I was already thinking ahead. Success had brought new challenges. Other chains were poaching our trained employees with high salaries. Competitors were copying surface elements without understanding core values. Some investors pushed for faster expansion, bigger returns, compromising the careful culture we'd built. We need to think bigger, I told the leadership team that evening. Not just more hotels, but deeper impact. What if we created an entire ecosystem? Over the following months, we launched initiatives that went beyond traditional hospitality. The Fairchild Foundation. Funded by profits, it provided grants to employees starting their own businesses. Former housekeepers opened cleaning services using our methods. Ex-restaurant staff launched catering companies with our recipes. We didn't see it as competition, but as multiplication of our values. The Hospitality Justice Project, legal aid for exploited workers across the industry. We'd been fortunate to have resources to fight back. Most didn't. Our lawyers took cases pro bono, recovering millions in stolen wages for workers at other chains. The Eleanor Fairchild Institute, a full university partnering with state schools to offer accredited degrees in ethical hospitality management, free for employees' children, affordable for everyone with curriculum based on our practices. But perhaps the most meaningful development was the Industry Ethics Board Madison proposed and now chaired. Former competitors sat together monthly, sharing challenges and solutions. Properties that met standards received certification that guests increasingly demanded. We're not just running hotels anymore, Madison observed during one board meeting. We're changing how business thinks about itself. She was right. Business schools sent students to study us. Government agencies consulted on worker protection laws. International hospitality organizations adopted our standards. The girl thrown out with $40 had somehow influenced an entire industry. Yet personal success felt hollow without personal connection. I'd been so focused on building the business that I'd neglected building a life. At 35, I had an empire but ate dinner, alone had wealth, but no one to share it with, had won every battle, but wondered if I'd lost something harder to quantify. The answer came from an unexpected source, James Chen, Tom's son, who'd joined the company fresh from hotel school 5 years prior. We'd worked together professionally, but when he asked me to dinner, not to discuss quarterly reports, I realized I'd been blind to what was developing. You know everything about me, I protested on our first real date. My family dysfunction, my obsessive work habits, my inability to trust easily. I know you turned pain into purpose, he countered. That you wake up thinking about employees' families, that you still visit your mother's grave every Sunday, that you're human, not the saint everyone's trying to make you. I'm not sure I know how to do this. Run a company, I've got that down. But actual personal happiness, same way you learned everything else, he smiled. One day at a time with someone who understands the journey. We married 2 years later at the Evergreen Inn in the garden where my parents had met. Maria officiated. She'd gotten ordained specifically for the occasion. Madison was my maid of honor, earning the role through years of genuine change. Employees filled every seat family in every way that mattered. Even Daniel sent a letter from prison, his first contact in 3 years. I know you won't read this at your wedding, he wrote, but I wanted you to know I was wrong about everything. Your mother would be proud. Despite everything, I hope you find the happiness I threw away. I didn't respond, but I kept the letter. Not for him, but as a reminder that even the worst choices could lead to recognition, even if too late to matter. The reception was held in the ballroom now named for Eleanor. Tom Chen gave a toast that captured everything. Anastasia proved that legacy isn't what you're given, but what you give. Not what you inherit, but what you inspire. Eleanor Fairchild left more than hotels. She left values that survived betrayal, grew through adversity, and now flourish in thousands of lives touched by her daughter's courage. As James and I danced where my parents once had, I realized the transformation was complete. Not just of hotels or companies, but of pain into purpose, betrayal, into benefit loss, into legacy. The empire now encompassed 90 properties across the country, each one a community of mutual success. 20,000 employees owned shares in their futures. Hundreds of thousands of guests experienced hospitality as it should be. Millions of dollars flowed to communities through partnerships and programs. But numbers couldn't capture the real victory. Maria's daughter graduated medical school debt-free thanks to our scholarships. Carmen's Training Institute had graduated 5,000 hospitality professionals. Tom's community programs had revitalized entire neighborhoods. Madison's ethics board had transformed from mockable idealism to industry standard. Any regrets? James asked as we watched sunset from our honeymoon suite, the same room where Daniel had once hoarded luxury for himself, now available to any employee at cost. None, I said honestly. Every pain led here. Every betrayal taught lessons. Every loss revealed what truly mattered. I wouldn't change the journey even if I could. That night, I dreamed of my mother for the first time in years. Not the frail woman in the hospital bed, but the vibrant leader who'd built with love. She stood in her garden surrounded by all the lives she'd touched, all the futures she'd enabled, all the hope she'd planted. Did I do okay, Mom? I asked in the dream. You did better, she smiled. You took what I started and made it eternal, not through buildings or bank accounts, but through believing in people I never got to meet. That's legacy, darling. That's love. I woke to find dawn breaking over the mountains, James beside me, messages from employees, sharing daily successes, and a future bright with possibility. The new legacy wasn't mine alone. It belonged to everyone who'd chosen building over bitterness, who'd proved that business could be noble wealth, could be worthy, and even the greatest betrayals could become foundations for better things. Eleanor Fairchild had died trying to protect this dream. Daniel had tried to steal it. Grace had tried to corrupt it. Madison had tried to exploit it. But in the end, truth outlasted lies. Service surpassed selfishness, and love literally conquered all. The hotel stood as testament not to revenge achieved, but to redemption chosen. Not to enemies destroyed, but to communities created. Not to inheritance reclaimed, but to futures enabled. And in every property, in every program, in every life, lifted by opportunity, Eleanor Fairchild's heartbeat echoed steady, strong and eternal. The girl with $40 had built something worth more than money, proof that purpose beats privilege, that caring creates wealth, and that the greatest revenge against those who choose darkness is simply steadfastly choosing light. This was our legacy. This was our love. This was our happily ever after, earned one choice at a time. To anyone facing their own betrayals, their own losses, their own $40 moments, remember this. You are stronger than what broke you. You can build from any rubble. You can transform any pain into purpose. The only question is, what will you choose to build? Thank you for joining me on this journey. May your own path lead from whatever darkness you face into light you create shared with others who need its warmth. Sometimes the greatest inheritances aren't what we're given, but what we give away. Sometimes the richest people are those who make others wealthy. Sometimes the best revenge is a life so well lived that bitterness becomes irrelevant. Build something beautiful. The world needs your light.